was just fantasy. He used to believe in something would happen. Meals for liberty. Gnostic sex cult, building his own world. A Gnostic sex cult, unhinged from reality. Totally lost it. What can we do but mock him relentlessly? It's not a Gnostic sex cult, James. No, it's not. Stop lying to your audience. No, it's not. It's not Gnostic change. Grip Mary Nardini tells us queer liberation means the annihilation of capitalism. Catch up, James. Whiteness means capitalism. Queer theory hates capitalism. Whiteness means capitalism. Queer theory hates capitalism. Whiteness means capitalism. It's all about capitalism. Everyone knows it's capitalism. The socialists know it's capitalism. Wake up, James. It's capitalism. Whoa. The socialists know it's capitalism. Wake up, James. It's capitalism. It's all about capitalism. Everyone knows it's capitalism. The socialists know it's capitalism. Wake up, James. It's capitalism. It's capitalism. To pocket all that money from the mills for liberty. The left hates capitalism, but James won't admit it. He refuses to believe queer theory stabilizes normativity, gender binary, and the nuclear family. But James blocks the truth, smears people who try to show him, creates an echo chamber for himself to reinforce his fantasy. Is to believe in something. What happens for liberty? Gnostic sex cult, building his own world. The Gnostic sex cult, unhinged from reality. He's totally lost it. What can we do but mock him relentlessly?
Happy Wednesday, fellow Gnostic sex cultists. My hair looks insane. It is so hot in my office, but I'm so upset because if you actually look at my hair in real life, it looks purple right now. It looks like this but it's not coming across on camera. It just looks crazy. Whatever. Everyone's just gonna have to deal with my crazy, crazy sweaty hair because it's 8,000 degrees. In my office, it's 8,000. Is it hot anywhere else, or is this just like me? It's like, This is why I used to have my head shaved. This is why, right here. I understand that men like women with longer hair. I get it. I really do. But it is so much nicer just to have a shaved head. It is so much nicer just to have a shaved head. It's not even funny, especially when it gets hot out and it's gross and it's yucky and all that stuff. But whatever. I was hoping the purple would come through more on the camera, but it's not today. It's not meant to be. That's all right. We're going to manage. It's apparently hot everywhere. It's also hot in Pennsylvania. It's hot in South Carolina. I know it's hot in Texas. It is hot everywhere. Oh my god. It doesn't even look like good sex hair. It's so hot. I keep trying to make it into like good sex hair, and it's not even doing that. It's not even doing that. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. Oh, Lauren Southern did a thing with trigonometry. I have no idea about that. So guys, welcome. Now, I thought it would be fun today to go back into the archives, and I thought it would be fun to find out What is Robin DiAngelo up to lately? Why isn't this sharing? There it is. What's Robin DiAngelo been up to lately? Robin DiAngelo, of course, the most famous race grifter of 2019 and 2020, wrote a book called White Fragility, which was on top of the New York Times bestseller list for like 11,000 weeks. Everyone had to read it. Everyone had to know what was going on. You all had to do your anti-racist training. I had all my lefty liberal friends coming into my DM saying, Carlin, have you signed up for the anti-racist training yet? And I was like, why on earth would I need to do that? I'm not racist. And they go, but you are, you're white. And so you're racist. And so you have to, this really did happen. These people, these women I had known for years and years and years and years and years were all of a sudden like, Carlin, you're racist because you're white. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? And then they all made me read this book. And actually I read the entire copy of White Fragility in one day. And I was live tweeting it as I was reading it. And there's actually a video of me. It was one of my first like viral videos that I ever had when I launched this YouTube channel. Well, not when I launched it, but like when I was starting to get into the politics arena. You can go back and watch it. Yes, this was John Morgan's first introduction to me, was the video of me reading White Fragility. I descended into the pit of insanity in the reading of this book. I really did. This book is insane. If you never read it, don't do it. Not worth it. Not worth it. But the thing is that Robin had a problem. Robin liked to do presentations in which she said over and over and over and over and over again that all white people are racist. Now, I know that we know that when most leftists are talking about whiteness or white supremacy, they really mean capitalism, which is a reference to the idea of systemic racism, which is the system that upholds capitalism. When they say systemic racism, they're not actually focused on the race part, they're focused on the system part. If they say institutional racism, they're not actually focused on the race part, they're focused on the institution part. The system or the institution is capitalism, which is defined as private property ownership. I know we all know that, okay? However, Robin is actually a racist. Like, legitimately. Robin DiAngelo is a real racist in the way that we traditionally mean racism. And I know this because Robin writes in her book about how she gets all nervous about being around Black people. And when she sees a big group of Black people, she doesn't want to be around them. And she is afraid of Black people, and she's always checking herself around. And it's just like Robin's book reads more like a confession than it does any sort of like training guide for how to become less racist. And so in Robin's case, when she's saying white people, she does actually mean white people. She does actually mean white skin color. And this is what's making it so confusing for a lot of people, because when we try to explain, no, when most leftists say whiteness, they don't mean your skin color, they mean the system of whiteness, which again is a reference to the system that upholds racism. The system is capitalism. No, Robin actually means skin color. And this is why I think she kind of fell off the map at some point, because really, we kind of stopped hearing about Robin in like circa 2021. You cannot understate the success that White Fragility had when it first came out. That book was everywhere. Everyone had to buy that book. And then all of a sudden, we just stopped hearing from Robin entirely. And I think that the reason we stopped hearing from Robin, honestly, is that she was not actually on board with the leftist agenda. Now, she may have been a useful idiot for them kind of early on as they were introducing anti-racist training to the public, but as she just kept going around saying all white people are racist, 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 over and over and over and over and over again, I think that she kind of she became more of a liability to the left than she became an asset. And so you saw Robin actually released another book after White Fragility. It's called what the hell is the book called? Beautiful, beautiful something. Nice Racism. That's what it is. Nice Racism. The book that, and I think we're going to be learning about this book today. The book that Robin released after White Fragility was called Nice Racism: How Progressive White People Perpetuate Racial Harm. So Robin kind of dropped off the map because she started blaming white liberals for being too racist. Now that doesn't align with what the left needs, and the left already had Ibram X. Kendi kind of in the what is in the bullpen, like in baseball when they're warming up the new pitcher. They already had Ibram X. Kendi in the bullpen. Ibram X. Kendi was legitimately black. Robin DiAngelo is not black. She's a white lady. And so again, like Nice Racism is like her confession of being a racist white lady, and that just wasn't useful to the left. So they stopped promoting her everywhere. And she kind of just fell off the map, and we haven't really heard a lot from her in the past couple of years. But I went back and I found some interviews. She was on C-SPAN not too long ago, I think, talking about her book, which the book actually came out a while ago, and she's still just shilling this book, which means I don't think this book was very successful at all. But she was on C-SPAN. She did this thing with Social Justice Academy called Nice Racism about the book. I found this training from her that was posted to YouTube a couple months ago. So this seems to be a relative. I actually think this is an older training though, because this is an older hairstyle Robin had. So I think this training, even though it just got posted to YouTube, is maybe a couple years old. But the one I want to watch today is this one. It's a little old. Okay. It's a little old. It's about a year old. But I think that this is going to give us the best sense of kind of like who Robin is in the minds of normies, because this is an interview that she did with WGBH in Boston. WGBH is like the NPR station in Boston. And so it's like, this is the interview that's targeted at kind of like the white liberals. And I think it'll be just a little bit more down to earth. It's at the Boston Public Library. Like, we know this was like a bougie white liberal event. So I thought we would just watch this and figure out where Robin's at. And maybe you'll just listen. Does that sound okay to everyone? We've got some other stuff too. If this interview turns out to be garbage, I've got the others on backup. I just want to know what's going on. We haven't heard from Robin in a while, and it's always nice to check in with old friends, you know? Before we get into that, I want to do some super chats. Maria C., thank you for becoming a member of the channel. I really do appreciate it. We've got Naruto in with his super chat. I thoroughly enjoy you and Lauren Chen trashing Michaela Peterson this morning. Yeah, we're going to talk about that. Hold that thought, Naruto. I've got a whole other bunch of stuff I want to look at. Bot says peg leg or hook arm. Well, a peg leg, obviously, because if I had a hook arm, I wouldn't be able to knit. So if I had to choose, I'm going to keep both my hands because then I can still knit. I need two hands to knit. So peg leg for sure. Let's see. Nick is coming in. MWM is interviewing Purge members of CPUSA. LOL. Nick, I have no idea what any of that means. So if you want to, like, can you chat in some more clarification so I can know what that means? Naruto, Robin did a book about racism and then made the stupid decision to attack her own party, which destroyed her own grift. Exactly. Rottweiler says, you think Robin DiAngelo is responsible for the right believing it's about race and not about abolishing capitalism? Is she even in queer circles? Yes. Yeah, I do. I think Robin actually played a really big role in how the right perceives all this stuff, because all the right was talking about for like 2 years was Robin DiAngelo and White Fragility. And they quote that book everywhere. And listen, we have to be honest, it was a cultural thing. But what the right doesn't like to acknowledge is that Robin was talking about a different thing than most leftists were. That's just reality. So thank you for the super chats, guys. As a reminder, I am trying to get $100 in super chats per show. So if you want to support the work I'm doing, sending in a super chat is a great way to do it. Now, of course, my number one way for you to support the work I'm doing is to subscribe to my Substack, $8 a month, $80 a year. If you can only do one thing for me to support the work I'm doing in terms of keeping me streaming, keeping me publishing content on the internet, it is subscribing to the Substack. I like that I can predict regular monthly or annual donations out of it, and that's all good. But if you want to do a little extra and help me out, because streaming takes a lot lot of my time, and I would really appreciate it. Sending in those super chats really does help. I'm trying to do a goal of getting $100 in super chats a show, which really shouldn't be that big a deal. 20 of you send in $5 because you're appreciative of the several hours long stream that I'm going to put together for you. That would be just great. And we hit the goal really easy. And then that makes life easier for me because I have to shill a little less, which means we can talk a little bit more. And that's really good. Oh, Midwestern marks. Okay. So Nick, when you said TPUS, CPUSA, I read that as Turning Point USA. All right, you're right. Thank you, Nick, for that clarification. I really do appreciate it. So that's another way you can support the work I'm doing. You can also head over to the Unwoke art store where I've got lots of awesome t-shirts on sale and hoodies and mugs and all that stuff. You can check out here. Here's the link directly to the t-shirt gallery. Lots of cool stuff you can buy there. And again, all purchases do go to support the work I'm doing. And I really appreciate it. And honestly, guys, I wear almost exclusively my Unwoke art t-shirts out in like the world. When I go out into the world, I always get compliments on them. They're great gifts, stuff like that. The t-shirt that it's actually printed on is really nice and soft, and it's a jersey, and I love it. And so I'm not telling you guys this is a good. I'm like this is something I actually almost exclusively wear at this point. So I appreciate you guys looking at that. But there's other stuff I want to talk about before we get started. Please make sure you mount the like button for me. Now, if you usually watch on Rumble, I'm really sorry, but I couldn't. Rumble wouldn't set up my stream. I tried for like 10 minutes to get the stream set up on Rumble. I don't know what's going on today. Rumble wouldn't set it up, so we're just doing YouTube and X. But please mount the like button for me. Mounting the like button does let YouTube know that that you like the stream or whatever, and then they'll recommend it to more people, which would be pretty great. Hang on, let me put a little ticker up across the bottom. There we go. So a couple things. I'm getting to that. Settle down. I have to tell the whole arc of the story, Squibby. Okay? Relax. So just a couple quick updates from the land of Twitter. Now, one of the reasons, I'm just going to do a little confession. The reason that I'm late today is because I was messing around on Twitter too much. I was just having way too fun. Listen. Don't fuck up my chat. I'm being nice to you. Don't do that. Come on. So the reason I'm a little late today is because I was messing around on Twitter. I'm sorry. It's just too much fun. I can't even people take Twitter so seriously. And I'm just like, I'm literally just screwing around and amusing myself. It's July. It's the summer. We're supposed to have fun. And so I'm sorry I was late today because I was messing around on Twitter because it was an especially exciting day. And I just want to give people some updates. So Lucas Gage, kind of, sort of, but not really, got unbanned on Twitter. And so this is really big news because a lot of the groypers and the America First people have been hammering Elon Musk over this stuff for the past couple days. And they've been doing all these Twitter spaces and they've been doing all this stuff. And I kind of came out and I said, so Elon Musk just the other day told us exactly what Lucas Gage was banned for. And so we kind of thought it was either that he cut up an Israeli flag with a sword or that he burned a copy of the Talmud. And both of those things, I can't defend. I don't like the optics of what Lucas Gage is doing. I also just generally think Lucas Gage is a low IQ retard. I'm sorry. I know Nick Fuentes disagrees with me on whether or not Lucas Gage is a low IQ retard. And we're going to talk about that, but I'm allowed to think that Lucas Gage is a low IQ retard, okay? I don't want to be friends with him. Nick does. That's fine. I don't judge Nick's decisions. He's a grown man. He can make his own choices. But I could still, if it had been the Israeli flag, you could say that American flags are burned all the time on Twitter. They post videos of this. And so is it really different to destroy an Israeli flag than an American flag, even if you're doing it with a sword? I could kind of get behind that idea. I could kind of get behind the idea of burning the Talmud as an act of protest, even though I personally don't think the optics are good and I don't think it's productive. I can look at those two tweets and see them as kind of a free speech issue. But when Elon Musk posted the tweet that Lucas actually got banned for, it was this. He said, "The rabbi admit Jewishness is a poison to us. They have every right to we have every right to remove these poisonous people from their satanic isms. from our society. I can't get behind that, man. I disavow. I can't get behind that. And you can make the argument that he's not inciting violence. He's not asking anyone to do anything violent. There's probably no danger of imminent violence as a result of this. However, it was just a stupid choice. It was a dumb effing choice. And it's like one of those things. I tried to explain this to the Groypers on the Weekly Sweat, and Beardson kind of agreed with me, and Wurzelroot didn't. And I understood Wurzelroot's point as well. And I understand the point of view of all the Groypers who think that you should push as hard as you can on the free speech issue. And in some ways, I do respect that. But as I've gotten older, I've learned that just because you can do something doesn't actually mean you should do something. And it's one of those things that when you have a very large account, that account can be used for a lot of good. And if you screw it up, all because you want to post stuff like this on the internet that absolutely could be interpreted by some people as being way more aggressive than is reasonably necessary, you're just shooting yourself in the foot. I just don't think it makes any sense. So we found out this is what Lucas Gage got banned for. He was raging all over his Rumble channel. They were posting all these crazy videos that, quite frankly, looked crazy, where he was just yelling at the camera about how he does not condone violence. And I don't know about you guys, but there's nothing that I believe more than a grown ass Italian man yelling at his camera in black and white with ominous music behind it, and he's yelling about the fact that he doesn't condone violence and is a perfectly peaceful person. The optics were not good. They just weren't. And also, Lucas Gage shit talked me on his stream on Monday, and I was not appreciative of that because literally all I said was, I will pray for your family. And then Lucas Gage proceeded to open some fucking file he has on me and continues to shit talk me. And I was like, bro, what the fuck? I literally just came here to say I'm praying for you and your family. Come on. So he got banned for that. And now today we find out that kind of he got unbanned, but not really. Not really. Oh, that's not it. Hang on. We're going to go to that in a second. Hang on. Where is it? Oh, wait, I know where it is. I had to scroll up. Now we find out that, maybe he's actually not really unbanned. So it looks like what Twitter did was that they allowed the account back on the platform. They're allowing Lucas Gage to send DMs from the account and browse on Twitter from the account, but they're not actually allowing Lucas Gage to post anything for the full 6-month suspension. So what I think happened is probably law enforcement is probably trying to investigate the harassment that Lucas Gage is undergoing. And I don't want to diminish that, man. The harassment is real. And it sucks. And I wouldn't wish that on anyone. I really wouldn't. So I'm thinking that what probably happened is that law enforcement is trying to get access to the tweets on his timeline and the information related to that. So Twitter had to figure out a way to unban him without actually giving him access to be able to do stuff. That's what I think happened. And what I said about it, and I said it in response to this tweet, I said, I'm going to be honest, I can't really defend this tweet. You can argue that it's not inciting violence by the specific definition, but Lucas didn't think. He played right into their hands. He gave them what they wanted. Fuck around, find out. He can use the 6 months to detox. Well, guess what? I'm not the only one who thought that. I am not, in fact, the only one who had this opinion. And I want to play this for you guys. I want to play this clip. This is from Nick Fuentes' show last night. And one of the reasons I want to play this for you is not just that I think that Nick agrees with me on this, and it feels good when Nick agrees with me. I like it when Nick agrees with me. However, this is also reflective of what I've been trying to tell you guys about Nick Fuentes since I started listening to him more closely since October 7th, which is that something happened. And maybe it was the influence of Keith Woods. Nick seems to allude to that. Maybe it was he's taking just things more seriously since getting his Twitter account back. Maybe it's that he's just starting to grow into this thing that he's built. I don't know. But Nick Fuentes is evolving. And Nick Fuentes is being self-reflective. And he's looking at things that he's done in the past. And he's saying, you know what? Maybe I could have done it differently. maybe that wasn't the right thing to do. Maybe this is something that Lucas Gage could learn from, to say, just because I can do something doesn't mean I should do something. I really think this is like one of the most important life lessons that anyone can learn, especially like fiery people like me. Like, I'm very fiery. Nick is a very fiery person. Like, people like us, and I think Lucas Gage is also a very fiery person. We can say things off the cuff very, very quickly that come off very aggressively to other people. And we don't always realize, because we are fiery people, we don't always realize that not everyone is a fiery person. Not everyone is going to receive that information well. And I think that one of the most important things that people like us can actually learn is that you have the ability to say something. You can do it. Like, it's not against the law. Like, you're not going to go to jail or anything. But just because you can do something doesn't always mean it's the best idea. And it doesn't mean that it's the best strategy if you have bigger long-term plans. And sometimes you just got to zip it and rein that shit in. It's just the way it goes. That's called being an adult. When you grow up and you become an adult and you exist in an adult world, you actually have to start acting like it at some point. And so, while there is a time and place for play and tomfoolery and maybe even a little bit of belligerence and righteousness and all that stuff, there's also a time and place to be just a little bit more thoughtful, just rein it back a little bit. And that's okay too. And so I want to play this clip from Nick, not that one, that one. I want to play this clip from Nick, so you guys can see. You can hear his answer to the Lucas Gage question, and you can also hear for yourself that Nick actually does seem to be evolving. And I think this is a good thing. I think this is positive for all of us. Let's listen.
A low IQ retard who can articulate thoughts but rather just schizo screams the Jews. He'll never forget one time he ended up hijacking your Twitter space by doing the Reddit meme and compared the JQ to some cringe Lord of the Rings shit. Then he also tried to uninvite someone to a pack.
Me.
Well, look, I do think he needs to rein it in a little bit. I think he's drawing a lot of attention to himself. It's not that I'm not sympathetic, but he is drawing a lot of negative attention to himself, and it's a little over the top. And I fear that I'm going to be perfectly honest. My fear is that if you push too far, it's going to ruin it for everybody. You know, like him doing these provocative things, burning shit, using a sword, you know, this maniac routine, like, it's not helping, I don't think. So I'm very sympathetic to what he's going through. I think he shouldn't be banned. I think he shouldn't be harassed. But sometimes it's like, okay, it's time to, sometimes you got to turn the camera off, you know? So I think he should regroup. He's got banned on Twitter. It sucks. It's unfair. It is what it is. I think he should take the time to regroup, take care of his situation, get safe. But then when he returns in 6 months, it's got to be disciplined. And, you know, I struggle with it too. You know me, I get fired up. I get over the top. We got to be like Keith. We got to keep it optical. Keith Woods is so mellow and so disciplined. And as such, he's very persuasive. I don't think he'll ever be banned. And I think that does matter. Like, your approach does matter. And it's already, our ideas are already, people consider them to be taboo. So there's already a barrier to entry, so to speak. It doesn't help when you're screaming. You know, you just got to literally bring the volume down, calm down. No one will be persuaded about these types of issues if you're screaming. You need to present it in a calm, reasonable way. And I know it's difficult because it requires extraordinary strength to be able to withstand the pressure, but that is what we have to do. So I wouldn't go that far. I think you're insulting him. I wouldn't insult him like that. And you also have to be sympathetic. His family is being threatened, and that's not cool. And so you understand the position that he's been put in. But if you're in a position where you are stirred up, you gotta chill, because I don't think it helps to be screaming. I mean, you know who that helps. If they can make a caricature of us as screaming banshees and maniacs, it's not good. And, I understand to an extent, if someone is punchy and provocative and funny, I get that, but there's a fine line between that and kind of jumping up and down. So I wouldn't say those things. I think you're insulting. I think you're being a little bit rude, and I don't think he's low IQ. I think he's a smart guy, and I think he can articulate his thoughts if you listen to him. But I do think that, sometimes people become their own worst enemy just because the approach is uncontrolled. The approach needs to be very intentional and deliberate and controlled. So that's how I feel about that. It's not that I'm not sympathetic. I am. It's not that I don't support him. I do. But I do worry. Because it almost seems like he's giving them a perfect excuse to kick us off. I feel like things are going really well right now. I think everybody's doing well. And when you push it like that, and listen, I did the same thing last year when I did that speech and I said it's a holy war. That was an unforced error. It was a mistake. I shouldn't have said that.
Yeah.
The way that I said it, it doesn't matter of course I didn't mean it that way, but it was not a good choice of words. And I think I suffered needlessly as a result. I think it spoiled a lot of momentum as a result. And I've made an effort. I met Keith, and I think Keith kind of showed a good example. And it's not that of course I'm still funny, and, you watch this show, the show's still wild and funny and free. And, I speak freely, but I am a lot more careful about avoiding those very, very defined, sharp lines that exist. And the lines are getting better. It used to be that you couldn't talk about these things. Now it's really specific things that you need to avoid. And so we just need to be very, very observant of that, because we have a really great opportunity right now. It's like a renaissance of free speech. There's a huge opportunity to push the ball down the field, get the information out there, persuade a lot of people, build our platform, make money, all of it, all the above, network. I don't think it's worth it to squander it by doing provocative stunts and teetering on that line. I know I don't think he's crossed it, but he's teetering on that line. It's just like, why? Let's just lower the temperature, lower the volume. Let's just regroup a little bit. So that's how I feel about it, if I'm being perfectly honest.
Look at that. Our boy is growing up. Our boy is evolving. Our boy is getting more nuanced in his takes. And even I would go so far as to say that hang on. That our boy is even getting more nuanced in his clothing choices. Because I gotta say that while I am extremely appreciative of the fact that Keith Woods seems to have tempered Nick Fuentes, honestly, because I just think that that's best for everyone involved. Listen, Nick and I don't agree on everything, and Nick is correct when he says it's really effing gay that we both have to say that all the fucking time. But I think that Nick Fuentes is like one of the most valuable things that exists in the space today, so far as I'm concerned, because he's the only person in the position to actually figuratively burn down the conservative establishment, which is holding us all back and is the biggest obstacle in all of our ways to getting what we want. And Nick and I might have different visions for the world, and we might want different things, but we can bicker about that later. I don't really care right now. The conservative establishment is the number one enemy, and Nick Fuentes is the person that can rid us of this monstrosity and expose all the hypocrisy and all the bullshit and all the goddamn shills and everything. And so that's why I'm on board with him, not because I agree with everything, but because we have a common enemy. And sometimes, you just adults got to work together. And I also think he's really funny. And I just like him and all that stuff too. That's all true. But I have to give Nick credit, because Nick, with his new studio, is even upping the tie game. It's very important to me that in addition to becoming more nuanced and more diplomatic and a little bit just like less crazy, that Nick also step into manhood and get a new selection of ties, because I'm sorry, listen, I know that men have things about like their dad's clothes, but some of the ties that Nick wears just looks like his dad's ties. It looks like he went into his dad's closet and picked out a tie, and it's from the 90s, and he's better than that. And so, in addition to commending Nick on his nuanced take regarding Lucas Gage and all of the insanity that's been swirling around that, can we also just take a moment to appreciate Nick's tie selection from last night? I feel like I feel like this is one of the roles that I can be really good for. In lieu of Nick having a girlfriend, which I know eventually he is going to find a hot young Italian Catholic virgin that he is going to date and court and make his wife and procreate with to produce spawn. I know all that. But in the meantime, because Nick doesn't have a girlfriend right now, I'm really trying to be a positive influence to try to encourage him to get better ties. And so I've started rating Nick's ties on Twitter. I've started doing a rating system for his ties. And when he wears a good tie, I'm going to give him good feedback. And when he wears a bad tie, I'm going to give him bad feedback. But it's all with good fun, and it's all in terms of like I just want him to dress better, and I feel like he doesn't have a woman in his life to do this for him. He doesn't have a woman to go buy his ties for him. And so I'm just going to gently nudge. You know, someone's got to do it, okay? Someone's got to do it. This is what happens when you have a whole room full of men and they're all doing man things. And this is I really do believe that this is one of the most valuable contributions that I can make to this whole thing. And so that's what I'm going to do. But there was more news. There was more news last night. You know, everyday therapist, it's baby steps, all right? We're baby stepping our way to a more evolved tie situation. It's okay. Nick just got his new studio. Nick's hair is looking good. Like there's just steps, man. There's steps. But there's more news. There's more news. Now, yesterday, Lauren Chen posted this video. Let's just listen to what Lauren Chen had to say about the whole Nick Fuentes, Jordan Peterson, and we'll get to the Robin DiAngelo stuff in a sec, guys. I've just got this other stuff I want to talk about first. Don't worry, the main event's still coming. Let's listen to what Lauren Chen had to say about the whole controversy between Nick Fuentes and Michaela and Jordan Peterson.
Michaela says that being ratioed by Nick Fuentes just illustrates her point that X is popularizing a dangerous ideology by not grouping Nazi posts in with hate speech already moderated. I didn't delete the original post from fear. I expanded on it because moderation is a tricky topic. Also, Nazism is a bad long-term strategy, Sam, especially for a senator. So here's the charge that because X allows free speech, it's actually popularizing, Nazism or anti-Semitism. Like basically that free speech is to blame for this radicalization. This is literally the argument from the left that we've heard for years. I mean, really since 2016, that the only reason that people are falling down, remember the alt-right pipeline, remember that? Is because YouTube or Twitter or Facebook, what have you, does not moderate enough. But here's what I would want Michaela to understand, just like I still want the leftists to understand it. Moderation doesn't change anybody's mind. It doesn't win arguments. I mean, the best thing you can say for moderation is that it keeps people in an ignorant state, which, I mean, might make it more likely that they agree with you, but it doesn't actually de-radicalize anyone. The most you could say for it is that it keeps people compliant. Instead, if you actually want to debunk anti-Semitism, put a stop to it, you need to address the claims that these people are making head on. Because we often hear that, oh, hatred is just something purely illogical and irrational. But with the far left or the far right, honestly, that's just not the case. Like anti-white hatred by Black nationalists isn't purely irrational. I mean, the lives of many people, especially in urban Democrat-run areas like Chicago, like Memphis, they are objectively bad, and white people are objectively just doing better than Black Americans. When responding to anti-white racism, is the best thing to do just censor any Black nationalist posts? No, we should at least sit down and at least try to have conversations with these people. And I think if the Petersons really do want to put a stop to anti-Semitism, they should tackle these issues head on. I would love to see a debate between Jordan Peterson and Nick Fuentes.
I would love to see a debate between Jordan Peterson and Nick Fuentes. I think that would be a great idea too. And so what I did is all I did was quote tweet Lauren Chen's video. And I said, I would love to see a debate between Jordan Peterson and Nick Fuentes, quote Lauren Chen. Well, something funny happened. Something funny happened last night. You know, I had gone to bed. I had meditated. I did a really nice healing meditation, and I sent healing vibes to someone who I want to heal a relationship with, and it was just all nice. And I was about to go to sleep. And of course, before I went to sleep, I pulled out my phone and I turned on Twitter as normal people do. And I noticed that Michaela Peterson had responded to my retweet. And so this is my tweet. And what's funny about this is this. You can see this is my tweet. Lauren Chen is in the quote tweet, but Michaela Peterson is responding to me. But Michaela Peterson must not have been paying attention because she thought that she was responding to Lauren Chen. And so I'm like, Michaela, have you been in your father's medicine cabinet? Like, what is going on? Twitter isn't complicated, Michaela. Why are you yelling at me like I'm Lauren Chen, Michaela? I'm not Lauren Chen. But Michaela Peterson says, literally everything my dad does is more important than debating that nimnal. I don't even know what that is. It's not going to happen. Nice video, by the way. Thanks for the DM prior to posting. I actually liked you. You can feel the you can feel the stomping of the feet, can't you? Like as you're reading this tweet. Siding with the anti-Semites is not only immoral, it's not going to age well in social media. So Michaela Peterson was having some feelings. You can see last night, 2:14 a.m. I was like, why are we arguing at 2:14 in the morning? But of course I responded and I ratioed the shit out of her. Now, of course, it wasn't the only ratio that she got, but I'm getting pretty proud of myself. I got to ratio Michaela Peterson at 2 a.m. That's great. And I said, Michaela, if your father is not capable of sitting down and having a conversation with a 25-year-old young man, then he has no business giving anyone advice on anything. Nick Fuentes is perfectly capable of having a civil, respectful conversation. Why can't your father? Listen, man, in real life, I know that I play a hooligan on the internet, but like in real life, I am actually a psychologist. I have a PhD in psychology. I had a practice for a while doing industrial organizational psychology. I wrote a whole book about mindfulness in the workplace. I did executive coaching for a long ass time. I did corporate trainings and keynotes for a long ass time. And now I'm doing this on the internet because I had a midlife crisis. And sometimes these things just happen, and COVID happened, and we don't need to rehash the whole thing. But in real life, I am actually a psychologist. Okay? And what I'll tell you is that I've had to have a lot of conversations with people I don't like. And I'm not even a clinical psychologist. I've never treated patients. That's not the type of psychology I practice. But I've had to have a lot of conversations with people that I don't align with, that I don't agree with, that I don't even like. And you know what? As a psychologist, it's actually your professional responsibility to put your bullshit aside and behave like an adult. And so I'm deadly serious. If Jordan Peterson, how old is Jordan Peterson? Like 60 something. Jordan Peterson is a 60 something year old world renowned psychologist who literally made his entire career off of, I shouldn't be compelled to say language that I don't agree with. Has done this world tour, has made tens of millions of dollars doing an entire world tour about how he is a world-renowned psychologist that's going to save young men from this corrupt society. Has written all these books that have made him millions and millions of dollars. Has done all this stuff. And you're telling me that Jordan Peterson is such a great world-renowned psychologist that he can't sit down and have a conversation with Nick Fuentes, who, if anyone actually watches Nick's show and not just like the clips that are taken out of context to smear him, if they actually just sit down and watch Nick's show for like half an hour, they're going to realize that Nick Fuentes is actually not the monster that people paint him as. He's actually a pretty reasonable guy, and he has crazy ideas. I mean, he's allowed to have crazy ideas. He has radical ideas. He admits he's a radical. He wants a completely different society than the ones we have. But guess what? He's allowed to want that. Nick Fuentes doesn't say anything hateful. He's always polite. He has been far more polite to Jordan Peterson than Jordan Peterson's been to him. And so it's and Nick Fuentes is 25 years old. It's going to be turning. Nick Fuentes has a birthday coming up, doesn't he? Where are we in Leo season yet? I forget. But Nick Fuentes is going to be turning 26. Nick Fuentes is on the downhill towards 30. Oh my God. He must be having a whole crisis situation in his head right now. That's okay. We'll talk about that later. We don't have to talk about that now. But the reality is that Jordan Peterson is almost 3 times as old as Nick Fuentes. Maybe not quite that much, but like, and he can't sit down and have a conversation with him. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. And so, listen, everyday therapist, also a clinical psychologist. I had several clients based on their history scared me until I actually met with them and interacted with them. Jordan Peterson should remember that he is a clinician and should be able to talk to anyone. What does Jordan Peterson actually think that Nick Fuentes is going to do? There's going to be video cameras on them. Does he think that Nick Fuentes is going to try to axe murder him? Because that doesn't make any sense. There's going to be video cameras there. Nick would never do that anyway. He's a Catholic. So the very worst thing that Nick Fuentes can do is say words that Jordan Peterson doesn't like. And P.S. Jordan Peterson is the guy that made tens of millions of dollars based on saying, I should be able to say words that people don't like. That is what Jordan Peterson's entire thing is. This is why Jordan Peterson became famous in the first place. Standing up and being able to say, I should be able to say words that you don't like. And now Nick Fuentes says words that Jordan Peterson doesn't like, and Jordan Peterson calls him a psychopathic rat for it and refuses to talk to him. It makes no sense at all. Everyone knows it doesn't make any sense. And yet Michaela Peterson, because she's dumb as a box of rocks, just keeps doubling down and doubling down and doubling down. And here we are. And I, of course, wasn't the only one who said something on the tweet. Nick Fuentes also replied to Michaela Peterson not long after I did, and he got a massive ratio on her. Again, it's not even hard for him anymore. It won't happen because you both have nothing, no arguments. You point and sputter about anti-Semitism, calling for censorship. Your father is supposed to be a fearless intellectual powerhouse, yet everyone knows he would never dare sit with me because he might lose. And that's really the reason that Jordan Peterson will never, ever, 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 ever debate Nick Fuentes, because Nick Fuentes would kick his ass. And it wouldn't even be close. Wouldn't even be close. Nick Fuentes would run circles around Jordan Peterson without even trying that hard. And we all know it. And that is why Jordan and Michaela Peterson are having a massive hissy fit on Twitter and calling him all sorts of names. Because when you have no intellectual arguments to use against someone, just call them a name. Your shill audience will agree with you because they're just drones that are into a cult of personality. So you'll feel like you got the W, but anyone with a working brain knows that if you're the one throwing around insults and you're the one that refuses to sit down and actually have a conversation with someone, take the L, bro. Take the L. Nick won. Nick will continue to win. And guess what? Lauren Chen piped in again. And she said, just as you rightly refused to post a black box on IG to prove you're not racist. I refuse to support censorship to prove that I don't hate Jews. If you're worried about my free speech consistency doesn't age well on social media, does that mean you retract your own previous statements in support of free speech? And you got to give Lauren Chen credit, because look what she did. She came with receipts. This is Michaela Peterson back in June of 2020. Apparently, it's post a black box on Instagram to prove you're not racist day. That would be that the world is insane. I'm not taking part, and no, that doesn't make me racist. Making a place for black voices. No, you're not. And then she says, you're virtue signaling, making space for a black photo, making everyone else who doesn't do it uncomfortable. How does a black photo help anything? Or is it supposed to show the world you're not the type of person that would literally kneel on someone until they're dead? And then here's Michaela Peterson in November of 2020. There are way too many arrogant people thinking they know what to censor at the moment. How about zero censorship? Clearly, nobody is smart enough to decide what to censor. How about no censorship? She seems to have changed her tune on that. And then this is her in June of 2022. Wow, Jordan Peterson got a Twitter strike. No more Twitter until he deletes the tweet. Definitely not a free speech platform, Elon Musk. And now, Michaela Peterson is running around Twitter at 2 a.m. saying, literally everything my dad does is more important than debating that Nimnal, meaning Nick Fuentes. It's not going to happen. Nice video, by the way. Thanks for the DM prior to posting. I actually liked you. Siding with the anti-Semites is not only immoral, but it's not going to age well on social media. Wah, 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 wah. I love nothing more than when the conservative shills expose themselves for who they are. I think it's beautiful. And so while some people might be disappointed with the clear and incontrovertible evidence that Michaela and Jordan Peterson meant none of what they ever said, never cared about free speech, never cared about individual liberties, just wanted money and power and fame and all the things that all the other grifters want. Well, people might be disappointed in that fact, because I know that Jordan Peterson did help a lot of people, and I know some of you have probably really been helped by Jordan Peterson. Remember that it's okay to acknowledge the good someone did in your life, and acknowledge that there may have been a time before they got addicted to benzos that they did actually have principles, and they did have integrity, and they had all those things. And then something happens, life happens, and they become horrible, unethical people with no principles, no integrity at all. And that doesn't change the value that you got from them back in the day. It just means that we also have to acknowledge that they've morphed into a horrible, intellectually dishonest person. And, you know, if we can expose that in such clear and incontrovertible terms, that's still a win so far as I'm concerned. Kenneth said, Carlin, I kicked my Twitter addiction. Thank you. Now I'm addicted to true crime podcasts. You're the best. Hey, good to hear that, Kenneth. Thank you for the super chat. I really do appreciate it. All right, guys, one more thing before we get into our Robin DiAngelo situation. Speaking of conservative shills, this is going to be quick. Speaking of conservative shills, you know, I was checking out the tweets of my arch nemesis and generally psychotic person, Carrie Smith, today. And I noticed that Carrie retweeted one Frank McCormick. Now, Frank and I used to be cool. I've actually never said anything bad about Frank in public. I've had Frank on this channel many times. He's a former teacher that was speaking out against woke stuff in schools. I thought he was doing good work. I got to tell you, though, probably about a year ago, I kind of started distancing myself from Frank because he was getting a little too shilly for me. And it was just like every time I looked at his Twitter, he was just like, it was conservative talking points. It was Moms for Liberty talking points. It was kind of like, and I was just like, oh, bro, you just want to be famous? Oh, God, come on. He was basically like tweeting stuff that you tweet when you're just looking for like conservative, like acknowledgement and validation and all that stuff. Like the old typical talking points about like, you know, I live in America where we do X, Y, B, and Z. And I don't suppose it was so gross. I was just like, I had to unfollow him. I was like, it's too bad, bro, because like I really did like him back in the day when he first kind of like came onto the anti-woke scene. But Just like, you know, like there are two types of people that become like the so-called like anti-woke activists. There's a group, most people who try to do this, they eventually end up going into the shill grifter circle where they just start posting the same bullshit talking points over and over again. And their content is incredibly boring and they never evolve and they never say anything new and they never teach you anything. And then there are the people that go do shit in the real world. And I was always the more doing shit in the real world variety. And my content over the year has evolved and my perspectives have evolved and I continue to take in new information and stuff like that. So I'm in the other camp. The other camp gets shit on by this camp because we don't toe the line and we don't say the things they want us to say and all that stuff. Anyway, so Frank and I had a little bit of a Twitter falling out. That's okay. Not all relationships are meant to last forever. And sometimes you have to move on. But I was a little surprised to see this subtweet from Frank today. Frank said, it's astounding how some individuals are so psychopathic and narcissistic that they'll choose a modicum of attention and validation from the hateful groypers and rather than live righteously in obscurity. Following false shepherds for earthly exaltation is unwise. Is anyone confused about who that tweet was about? Now, listen, there are a lot of people out there. I mean, first of all, there are a lot of people out there who don't understand why I'm like hanging around with the groypers, or they think I'm just doing it for attention, or they think I'm just doing it for clout. People who've been following this evolution that the groypers and I have had since October, I think you guys all know the deal in that I used to be very critical of Nick. And then things changed. And then I started getting to know the groypers. And then I started hanging out with the groypers. And then I went to AFPAC because Nick invited me to be a VIP. And then I met the groypers in person. And I had a really good time. And I like them. And they're funny as hell. And I really enjoy my time with them. And for some strange reason, and I haven't quite figured out why, the groypers actually seem to appreciate me too. And you know, it was a surprise. It was a surprise all around. I didn't see this coming. But like, I'm not involved with the groypers because I need all this attention. I'm not involved with the groypers because like, I'm involved with the groypers because they're the only ones doing anything interesting on the internet. I'm involved with the groypers because they're funny and they make me laugh. And they really want to see pictures of my boobs, which we'll talk about in a second, which is again surprising. I didn't expect that. So when I saw Frank tweeted this about me, I did what any normal person would do. And at first I quote tweeted him and I said, imagine unironically believing that someone having a different opinion than you is a sign of a severe personality disorder. Which, like, I mean, can we just stop with this? Can we just stop with this idea that if someone has a different opinion, then they're mentally ill? Like, it's so lazy, guys. It is so effing lazy. Frank McCormick is so pissed off that I'm getting attention from groypers that he wants to accuse me of being a narcissistic psychopath. Does that track for anyone? So that was the first thing I did. And then, you know, I got a little saucy, I got a little spicy, and I posted this picture of myself. Because again, there's one thing I know about the groypers is that, you know, they're not opposed to well, seeing my tits. Although I'm not even showing anything. I maintain like these pictures that I'm posting on Twitter just to make the haters go re all the way home, where you can barely see my cleavage. Like everyone's like, oh my God, she's posting nudes. Literally, no, I'm not. It's black and white. It's artistic, okay? It's okay because it's in black and white. That means it's artful. And I think it's a good picture. And I like the way it came out. And so I posted this and I said, I'm going to post this picture for the groypers just to piss Frank off. Exactly. This is my point. Cleavage is not boobs, okay? You can't see any nipple. And I feel like I'm showing less skin than like your average Fox News host. And I feel like this is not even, this is definitely not an R-rated movie. This is barely even a PG-13 rated movie. But you know, you can see what you can see. Yeah, see, Misa gets it. Misa, you know. I gotta say, no e-girls, but you're the funniest broad on the internet. Only woman occasionally worth listening to. Hey, I'll take what I can get, Big Bird. I do appreciate that. So I posted this picture because I knew it would get groyper attention, and well, it did. It did. It got a lot of groyper attention. I got a lot of groyper attention, which I appreciate and I think is very endearing. But more importantly, it got Frank some groyper attention. Oh, now Frank's responding. Frank is like, why don't you reveal your real name? Well, Frank, the reason they don't reveal their real name is because assholes like you would dox them, bro. The reason the groypers don't reveal their real name is because people like you want to dox and harass them, Frank. So Frank is having fun in the comments right now, and I don't feel bad. And so, yeah, enjoy that, Frank. Next time you want to subtweet me, because Frank usually gets about maybe a couple thousand views on his tweets. I mean, he has like 50,000 followers, but maybe like 1,000 to 2,000 views on his tweets. Like, you're welcome, Frank. I got you some engagement bucks. 11,000 views on this tweet. That's like normally like 10 times what you usually get, just because I retweeted you in your obvious subtweet of me, and I just showed a picture of my cleavage. You're welcome, bro. You're welcome for the groyper engagement. You're welcome for the engagement bucks. You know? Anyway, don't worry, Mary. Cleavage is not actually the topic. It's just a side note, because now we're getting into the real show. Guys, do mount that like button if you would be so kind. Now that I have talked and talked and talked and talked and talked, we are going to get into our main show for today, which usually ends up coming about an hour into the show. Who's ready to watch some Robin DiAngelo? Who's ready to see what Robin DiAngelo has been talking about? This is an interview that Robin DiAngelo did in Boston at the Boston Public Library about a year ago. And I just want to get an update. I want to hear some of Robin's ideas. And you know, we're going to spend some time here. So please, guys, mount the like button for me. If you don't feel like mounting the like button, you can high five the like button, put your arm around the like button, give the like button a kiss on the cheek. I don't know. Do follow your bliss with the like button, and let's get this party started.
I try to be less white. Now, I don't mean
I try to be less white. Where have I heard that before? I seem to recall. I try to be less white.
Being white people are bad, and it's bad to be white. That's certainly how people have used that to undermine the work. What I mean by that is I try to be less white in the ways in which being white is oppressive, in the ways that I have been socialized as a white person to be oblivious, to be racially ignorant but also arrogant, to be apathetic, to be silent, to privilege another white person's feelings over racism, right? To feel superior.
Good evening and welcome to your library. I am David Leonard, president of the Boston Public Library and an occasional moderator of some of our great programs here at the library. Tonight is one of our fall signature programs in our occasional public conversation series. Now, I first encountered our guests' work as I was doing some research on the state of racial equity in public libraries and the library profession writ large. And we certainly know that parts of the library profession in certain parts of the world and certain parts of the country tend to skew particularly white. A very alive and interesting conversation in that context. Dr. DiAngelo is an affiliate Associate Professor of Education at the University of Washington. In addition, she holds 2 honorary doctorates. She's a 2-time winner of the Students' Choice Award for Educator of the Year at the University of Washington's School of Social Work. She has numerous publications and books. In 2011, she coined the term white fragility in an academic article, which has influenced the international dialogue on race since. Her work and interviews have been featured on CBS, MSNBC.
Chief Trumpster, are you ready to learn how to be less white?
New York Times, The Guardian, BBC, NPR, PBS, and among many other forums, both in print and online. And in addition to her academic work, Dr. DiAngelo has been a consultant and educator for over 20 years on issues of racial and social justice. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Robin DiAngelo.
Thank you.
Now, to get us started, here we are, 2 white people having a conversation about racism and the state of racial equity in our society. I think it's important to acknowledge in any conversation who is in the conversation and who is not in the conversation. And so with our audience, perhaps we can broaden that. And secondly, isn't this a conversation that white people should be having more of anyway?
Yes. I want to be really clear that I don't believe I or any other white person can understand what we need to understand about racism if we are not listening to Black people, Indigenous people, and other peoples of color. And so much of what I've been saying, they've been saying for far, far longer. But we shouldn't only be listening to peoples of color. Racism is our problem, right? We are the obstacle and the barrier in large part. And while people of color have an understanding and an experience that I can never have, I do have a piece of it that they don't have, right? As an insider to whiteness, as insiders, there's just an understanding that is invaluable. There's a way that we can expose that. It's harder to deny when, you share that experience. There's a little bit of that nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Come on, we know. And I'd like to think that it helps soften the soil, if you will, so that white folks can receive and bear witness to the experiences of people of color. So absolutely, we need to be having this conversation.
I'm a big believer in that our personal biography leads us in part to the work in our area of study. So would you mind sharing with us what led you to this work in particular?
I don't mind at all. I'll just try to be brief. Nothing in the trajectory of my life would have me speaking publicly about race, would have me standing on stages and saying, I am white. Like most white people, I lived a segregated life. Like most white people, I was racially illiterate.
Robin grew up in a very rich neighborhood where she was only surrounded with other white people, and Robin did not actually encounter her first Black person until I think she was a teenager, like 17 years old or something like that.
I've never met a white person who doesn't have an opinion on racism. Have you? And usually pretty emotional, but that doesn't make it informed. And if in this country, if you have not devoted years of sustained study, struggle, and focus on this topic, you just simply cannot have an informed opinion on racism as a white person. So we have to start with the humility around that. And an example is that you can get a graduate degree in this country.
So Mary, I think you came in late. I did explain this at the beginning of the stream. So Robin is actually the exception to this rule. And just for people who came in a little bit late, I'll just do a quick too long didn't read. So I think that one of the reasons that Robin isn't really relevant on the left anymore. I'm just curious about what she's up to nowadays, and that's why we're watching this. But like Robin isn't really relevant on the left anymore because she wasn't really towing this line. When she says whiteness and white supremacy, she actually does mean skin color. And I think this is part of the reason why this is very confusing for the right, because the vast majority of people on the left When they say whiteness and white supremacy, they're referring to the system that upholds racism. That's what systemic racism is. The system that upholds racism. The system is capitalism. Or if they're talking about institutional racism, the institution that upholds racism, the institution is capitalism. Robin isn't doing that. She's actually talking about skin color. So you have to understand, though, this is the exception. This is not the rule. And this is why she's not relevant anymore, because she kept trying to attack the left for not actually addressing the racism that she's talking about.
Be certified as highly educated and have never discussed the foundation of the society, which is systemic racism.
Systemic
yes,
racism.
nothing prepared me for that, but there were a couple of endpoints that I had. First of all, I grew up poor and working class. And so from a very early age, I understood a particular experience of oppression. And I was very late to college. I didn't go to college until I was in my 30s. I was a non-traditional student. I graduated with a degree, had no idea what I could do with that degree. And then one day, somebody brought to my attention this position that had opened because the state of Washington, where I lived, had been sued for racial discrimination. And contrary to popular white mythology, it's very difficult to win a racial discrimination lawsuit because you have to prove intent. I'm not sure you could come up with a more effective way to protect racial discrimination than having to prove intent, which is very difficult to do. But the state lost that. The welfare department, DSHS, Department of Social and Health Services, was sued. And as part of the settlement, the federal government mandated that every employee in the state of Washington had to receive 16 hours. I'm going to emphasize these words, mandated diversity training. And they needed trainers to do this. And so somebody tapped me on the shoulder and I thought, oh, what a great job. That just sounds so fun. I love that kind of thing. I'm totally qualified. I mean, I'm vegetarian, so I couldn't be racist.
She uses that line all the time.
I'm nice. It's just a classic, Seattle liberal. And so I applied.
With social work background, right?
Yeah. So I was in for the most profound learning of my entire life on every possible level. So because the first thing that happened is they sent us out in interracial teams. So I'm working side by side with people of color who are challenging me in the way that I see the world and the way I see myself in the world. And I do want to share this story. We had to go through a 5-day train the trainer. There were 40 of us that were hired, pretty much an interracial group. And we had to learn the curriculum. And the afternoon of the first day, the white people basically looked at the people of color and said, okay, this is the part where you teach us about racism. And they looked back and said, basically, oh, hell no, that's not our job. And I remember just being really put out, like, well, how are we supposed to know if you don't teach us, right? Because I have that classic consciousness, race is what they have, I'm racially innocent. And if you don't tell me about it, how would I know? And I'll never forget, in the middle of all this tension, this white woman calls out into the room, all the white racists, raise your hand. And all these white people raised their hand. And I just sat there like, oh my God. Well, I mean, I'm fairly astute, so I knew it was the party line, but I wasn't going to raise my hand. I'm not racist. And I drove home thinking I showed them I was the good one. What I showed them is that I had no idea what racism was, that I was not self-aware, that I was likely to be very defensive about any feedback to the contrary. And I look back now and I think, what a brilliant move. In 1 second, she just called that out. And
Robin is one of the people that push the idea that if someone tells you that you're racist, that you just need to sit there and be like, okay, tell me more about how I'm racist. And then you have to make amends for your racism, and you just have to accept it, and you're not allowed to argue. And there's a whole chapter in the book White Fragility that talks about how white women will break down. It's literally called White Women's Tears, where she says that white women will always break down and cry every time someone says that they're racist in order to get out of their racism.
Revealed where the room was at in their understanding. Now, today I would raise my hand because I understand that to mean something very different than I did at that time. So then we went out in the field, and it was almost 100% white, and it was. I'm trying to think of what words I can use. It was really hard, and the hostility was off the charts. We were often in 100% white rooms with white people complaining bitterly about not being able to get a job anymore because of affirmative action. And you're looking around going, where are they, that are taking your jobs? So it wasn't rational, but it was very real in the emotions. And I watched them express so much hostility when the only person of color in the room was whoever was standing by my side. I drove home with that person. I bore witness to the pain of it. And just over the years, it became so predictable. It was almost like a script. And I just got better and better at articulating how we pull that off. How we live such segregated lives and yet insist that race has no meaning. So I went on to get a PhD.
Which then ultimately leads to white fragility in 2018. And New York Times bestseller, one of the most borrowed books from the Boston Public Library from our equity reading list. Post the George Floyd killing.
Yeah.
So what you just described, that this early understanding that whiteness and the fragility that goes with it, even from those early days of training, shows up in the book. So I think there's a through line completely that almost comes full circle to this.
Yeah,
work.
I actually wrote the original article in 2011. So pretty much all I've ever written from my dissertation on has been trying to make systemic racism and whiteness visible. And I wrote White Fragility in 2011, and I figured it was buried in some academic journal somewhere that nobody ever saw. And one day somebody quoted extensively from it in like a weekly paper, and it just exploded virally. And I began to get emails literally from around the world from people who said, you've named an experience I have that I didn't have language for, either as the recipient or the perpetrator of that. And so I wanted to make it more accessible and turn it into a book. I went to Beacon Press.
I mean, this is actually, Gloria, this is actually a really good point, because like Robin was a great useful idiot for the left. Because when the left was really spinning up and calling everyone and everything racist, I have a whole list in my book. Here it is, right here. Actively Unwoke, the ultimate guide for fighting back against the woke insanity in your life. I have a whole list of things that were labeled as racist. I wrote this book back in 2021, so it's a little bit older now, but let's see. Where is my list of things that are racist? I always look for this and I can never find it. Well, I'm on the internet, because I'm always looking for it. Okay, here is the list of things that were racist. It's on page 5 of the book. Math, traffic signals, soap, beer, dance, Dr. Seuss, milk, trees, hockey, cycling, cereal, Gandhi, English, Abraham Lincoln, swimming, classical music, owning a dog, and even dogs themselves. And I really think, so again, this book was written in 2021. It didn't come out till 2022. A lot of things have changed since then, although the book still does hold up, and I still stand by most of it, not the last chapter, but most of the book's pretty good. Anyway, the point is that race is one of the weapons that the left was using against people to try to push like communist ideas and Marxist ideas, but people didn't understand that because it was all wrapped in the guise of race, right? And I think that Robin was very useful to people on the left because she convinced a lot of white people on the left that they were racist and they had to do anti-racist training. And now we know, because we have them on video admitting this, that the goal of anti-racist training is not to make society less racist, it's to create a socialist world. So I think Robin was very useful in convincing people that they needed to do anti-racist training. They needed to buy into these collectivist ideas. And from there, they had to take it and push people like Ibram X. Kendi and all these other people. But Robin was a massive useful idiot for the left. The last chapter in the book is called Fight Like James Lindsay. And you know what? It's not that I completely disavow the last chapter in the book. I actually do believe that, listen, excuse me, when I wrote the last chapter of the book, James Lindsay was one of the people out there that was fighting harder than anyone. And so it was true to what the experience was at the time. I do believe to a certain extent that if everyone fought as hard as James Lindsay does, we wouldn't have a problem right now. And that was kind of like the message that I was trying to convey. Like, there are other people that are doing this stuff. You can do this stuff too. But things have changed, and James Lindsay wasn't a paid shill at that time, and he now is. But that doesn't mean that people shouldn't be fighting that hard, because, they should be. It's the only way things actually change. Anyway.
Press, which is a local Boston nonprofit social justice press right here. And it did debut on the New York Times bestseller list. And it was still on that list in the summer of 2020.
Right.
And that's important to me, because sometimes people say that, I just came out of nowhere in 2020 and took advantage of that moment. And I've been doing this for a very long time.
Yeah, I was taken by the 2018 publication date, and yes, the original 2011 article date that it's based on, because this is not a new topic. I wonder, could we spend a little time on the title?
Sure.
Because it does capture what your work is about. I think we were chatting before about defining whiteness as a concept that emerges in our struggles to deal with what racism is. So, was that something that you had from day one, or did it emerge as the work, starting with those training programs? Went from?
I mean, the phrase white fragility just came out of my mouth in a moment of frustration, like, oh, this white fragility, right? Just like, here's somebody else falling apart just because you mentioned that, being white has meaning. I mean, that's how fragile we can be, that to just say white can upset somebody. But it's not fragile in its impact. And I think that's really important. Sometimes people who don't read it see white fragility and say, oh, you think white people are weak. I think our stamina is very low, but it's a bit like broken glass. And somebody recently said it's like a bomb is fragile, right? Because behind it is leveraged the weight of institutional power and control. And so it's dangerous. When we have that meltdown, when we get upset and defensive, often whoever caused that defensiveness, things get worse for them, not better. So I find it to be a really effective form of everyday white social control. I'm going to make it so punitive and miserable for you to call me in on this, for you to try to share your experience with me, that you more often than not will just choose not to go there. And so you stay in your place, I get to stay in mine. So it's not a benign fragility.
Right, because I think, most individuals, generalizations only go so far, right? But most individuals, no one wants to admit that they are themselves racist as an individual. I think we can come back to that in a second, right?
Take a note, so I remember.
But you talked a moment ago about our society being based more on systemic racism. And I think this distinction between individual acts of racism.
So systemic racism, when they do say systemic racism, again, that is a reference to capitalism. Systemic racism means the system that upholds racism. The left believes that capitalism, which is defined as private property ownership, created slavery in America. Slavery is the ownership of people as private property. Slavery then created systemic racism, which is racial disparities in outcomes. And the system in systemic racism is capitalism, because that is the origination of the idea. So when they are talking about systemic racism, that usually tends to be more of a reference to capitalism. However, Robin doesn't understand this. And so I want people to keep this in mind. What the interviewer is talking about is capitalism. What Robin is still talking about, because Robin is a walking projection of herself, Robin is still going to be talking about skin color because Robin doesn't understand that when most people on the left are talking about systemic racism, they're not talking about the racism part, they're talking about the system part. So listen to this. See if you can discern the difference.
Systemic racism, but systemic racism shouldn't be letting individuals off the hook for their role in it or their responsibility to do something about it.
No.
And so this is a set of nuances that I think for people starting out with this challenge.
See, that's what he just said is like, so Robin's perspective is systemic racism, capitalism is the system that we need to be dismantling. But Robin's focus is hyper on the individual and how the individual contributes to either doing the work to dismantle the system or not.
Is a little difficult to grapple with.
Yeah, so individuals aren't institutions or systems, but systems are made up of individuals. And systems are not going to change if the individuals within those systems are not transformed, right? And this is so foundational, and it goes back to that story I told. What I heard when the woman called out, all the white racists raise your hand, was very different than I would hear today. So like most white people, I was taught to think of racism as individual, only individual, which means you probably have it, but I don't, right? That one over there, not this one over here.
I called someone a bad name or did something I shouldn't have done, right? And then suddenly...
And even then, you probably wouldn't say you were, but yes.
No.
All right, so individual, conscious, has to be conscious, it doesn't count, and intentional. Meanness across race. And those three things are very important to the mainstream definition, and it beautifully protects the system of racism because it pretty much exempts everybody. I'm really clear that I have perpetrated racism across my life, and I'm also really clear that never once was it conscious or intentional. It caused harm nonetheless. And when you change your understanding of what it means, you have such a different response. And you actually don't mind being called racist in the sense that it helps you identify, all right, what am I doing that's not conscious? It's not intentional, but it's causing harm. So white nationalism is on the rise, and I don't want to minimize that. It's growing. The recruitment among young white men in particular is accelerated. They do get in through sexism, and then they grab, and pull the young men over to white nationalism and white supremacy.
What?
And so we have to take that seriously.
Wait,
but I'm not a white nationalist, so my race.
Hang on. I need to understand what she's saying. Hang on. White nationalism. Okay, let's. What?
Mind being called racist in the sense that it helps you identify, all right, what am I doing that's not conscious? It's not intentional, but it's causing harm. So white nationalism is on the rise, and I don't want to minimize that. It's growing. The recruitment among young white men in particular is accelerated. They do get in through sexism, and then they grab, and
so they're saying that the recruitment funnel to white nationalism is that men don't like women because women are awful as a general rule, and the younger women get, the more awful they are. And so men don't like the current crop of today's women, and they don't think they can find anyone to marry that isn't a slut and stuff like that. And so because men don't like women, they get recruited to white nationalism. Yeah, anti basically this. And I actually think that probably the dissident right-wingers that are watching right now would actually agree with this, that anti-feminism is a gateway to being based and red-pilled. You guys agree with Robin DiAngelo. This is great. You guys are making new friends.
And pull the young men over to white nationalism and white supremacy. And so we have to take that seriously. But I'm not a white nationalist. So my racism, my forms of collusion with the system don't look like that, but they look like something. Because no one's exempt. So it's on me. This is where I get to be an individual. So what does it look like in my life, in all those unique interactions and intersections. You know, what does it look like for me? And that's actually a really empowering question. It's not awful.
And do you think it's more about individuals becoming more conscious of what we do as individuals in our lives that may have racist consequences?
I mean, it starts there. You have to become conscious, but if it ends there, it's functionally meaningless. My awareness without action to follow it up is functionally meaningless. So I also have to do different. And I really do think when you see it differently, you will be different. In situations, you will attend and notice to different things. So in your opening, you said it's always important to think about who's in the conversation and who's not. And that's a great example. When you're around the table where decisions are being made that affect the lives of those who typically are not at the table, you need to notice that. Wait a minute, who's this going to affect and how do we know? And so there's the awareness, but now the action is we're not going to make that decision until this table looks different.
Yeah, I mean, Ibram Kendi and his work starts to paint an arc that is a little different than the language you use, but ends up saying, you know, I'm going to do a very poor, do an injustice to his work, but it's not enough to change your own life, but we have a responsibility to change the systems, and being an active anti-racist is really what's called for, at least in one of his works. So to me, I think looking at your work and being aware of this concept of white fragility or whiteness as defined over and against, or as part of the dyad with blackness and what it means to be black or to be a person of color, combined with an obligation to become anti-racist, gives us a narrative whereby we do need to do more than just our own work at home.
Yes.
What in your work, in your training work, illustrates when does the light bulb go on? What is it that allows people to start to change or own responsibility for this?
Yeah, and I think it's a little bit like water dripping on a rock. So it's not just one moment and then you've got it, right? It's I think about it as every moment that I push against my conditioning into white superiority, the society is pushing it right back at me. And so I can never consider myself finished or having arrived. And the forces are seductive and they're
Robin literally says in White Fragility that she was racist from the time she was in the womb. Robin believes that she was racist before she was born. She believes that she will be racist her entire life. She believes that the very best she can do is to be constantly doing the work to overcome her inherent racism. And it is a job that will never be fully achieved because she literally, and she said, I'm not making this up. She says this in her book. She says this in White Fragility, that she has been racist since she was in the womb. I don't think she's a socialist. I think she's a progressive because she doesn't understand the socialist talking point. She understands her talking points, which is all a projection of her inner racist. Like, really, Robin DiAngelo should just become a white nationalist. Honestly, Robin DiAngelo has more in common with the actual white nationalists than she has with the socialists.
Strong. And so you have to constantly, and you get the insight and then it kind of fades away and then maybe it comes back. So I can't really think of a moment. I think it was just the consistency of it.
And for people that you work with, does the light bulb go off? You know, in terms of that question of all the white racists, please raise your hand. What is it about the conversion moment that would have someone say, no, I don't need to raise my hand, to, yeah, no, I really should raise my hand with that question?
One thing I am grateful for within myself and that has enabled me to stay in the work is is I have messed up many times. That would be an example of, we could say that I really just showed the whole room that I was oblivious. But rather than give up, white fragility would have me go, well, then forget it. I'm not saying anything if I can't say anything right. And I think we've all heard that. And I'm not going to do this anymore. It's too hard. Right. Instead, each of those moments, I'm like, okay, what did I miss? How can I do better next time? You can't use your mistakes to give up. You use your mistakes to keep going. You're not going to grow without them. You be thoughtful. It doesn't mean you just kind of tromp all over and see what happens. Be thoughtful, but you will. You also need to be real and authentic.
Actually, this is a really good point from Mimi, and I think that the Groypers would actually. Well, maybe I won't speak for the Groypers. I don't know if the Groypers would agree with this or not, but like my experience with the Groypers is that they don't hate people that aren't white. They just don't believe in race mixing. So they believe that, like, if you're going to get married and have kids, if you're white, you should be marrying a white person. If you're black, you should be marrying a black person. If you're Mexican, you should be marrying a Mexican person. Like, they don't believe in race mixing, but it's not like they don't hate black people. They don't hate Mexicans. They don't hate anyone. They just say, we probably shouldn't be mixing these things because race is a real thing. This is not to be confused with exactly Wignats, who the Groypers don't like. Wignats are white supremacists. Groypers are just saying, like, we just don't believe that we should be crossing the races, which, again, this is not something I ascribe to. But I understand why I understand their philosophy, and I don't think that they're coming from a hateful place. It's not something that I personally think is something that is. I don't think it's the hill that I'm going to die on. I will say that. But, like, so what Robin believes, Robin actually does believe that, like, white people are superior to black people. She 100% does. And so Robin is actually probably more racist than the Groypers, because there are black people in like America First. Like, when I was at AFPAC, I was standing right next to Bryson Gray and his wife at the bar, and Bryson Gray was just hanging out, and he was, like, actually watching boxing on his phone. And, like, when I was standing next to Bryson Gray, a very black musician, it was just Groyper after Groyper after Groyper coming up to Bryson Gray going, Bryson, I love you. You're the best. I love your music. Like, they loved Bryson Gray. I went with Patriot J. Patriot J is very black. Patriot J was a VIP at AFPAC. He had a great time. He was running around up by the stage. Like, you could, like, I mean, it's like there are black people that go to these things and they're treated really well, and everyone loves them and everyone welcomes them, and no one is saying anything mean to them because of their skin color. They literally just don't believe that white people should be marrying black people, which I guess, like, again, you're allowed to have that position. I don't personally have an issue with it. I think, like, you should marry who you want to marry, but, like, I understand why they say that, and I understand the philosophy behind it. Yeah, Nick loves hip hop. Nick loves Kanye West. Kanye West, very black. So Robin is actually probably more racist in the way that she means it than the people that she's demonizing as white nationalists.
Willing to make a mistake and to receive feedback and to change. And so I think in any room, there are people who say to me, oh my God, I just saw something I'd never seen before. There's other people where it has to sit for a while. And then maybe it gets picked up at a later date by something somebody else said. There was a foundation there. So I don't know that there's any one answer to, but I know that if it isn't sustained, it's likely not going to.
Actually, Jan, Nick said on his show the other night, I forget which show it was. It may have been the Friday show. I forget which one specifically, but Nick definitely said on his show that he finds race mixing with white people and Mexicans to be less offensive than, like, white people and black people. His last name is Fuentes. Nick's father is literally Nick himself is part Mexican. So apparently there are levels. Nick Fuentes is the Mexican white supremacist.
work. And a lot of organizations will do the one-time thing, and there's no consistency. It doesn't keep going. And odds are that's not going to do it.
Could we talk a little bit about what the roots of racism might be in U.S. society in particular? We were talking a little bit about the 400 years of history upstairs, and while your work is around recognizing the role white people have to play in this whole dialogue, there are roots of racism itself that go back earlier. Do you have a narrative or a sense of how you put that together?
Well, I like to quote Ta-Nehisi Coates around this because it's been really useful for me. There is this narrative that it's just about difference and it's natural to be afraid of difference. And I'm not really sure that's true. It reminds me of, well, somebody has to be on top. Right? You ever heard that one? That's just human nature. Somebody's going to dominate. And my reaction is, well, who's most likely to say somebody has to be on top? The people on the top or the people on the bottom? The people on the bottom aren't usually going, somebody has to stand.
Look at that. Robin is against hierarchies. So even it's so interesting to listen to this now, because the last time I really listened to Robin was before we got into the socialism speak. Maybe Robin's more of a covert socialist than I gave her credit for, because Robin DiAngelo just denounced hierarchies. The thing that socialists want to get rid of is hierarchies. That's what equity means. Every time you see the word equity, that just means like flattening the hierarchy. So isn't that interesting?
Stand on me. Might as well be
Robin
you.
wants equity.
So for me, it's less important, is it true, is it false, is it right, is it wrong, which is so hard to sort out. But the question that's never failed me is, how does it function? What does that narrative do or not do? Does it open or close the conversation? So the difference is just natural kind of naturalizes racism, where racism is a relatively new construct. And it certainly appears across all human history that we have people have dominated one another. So we could say that's natural. And across.
Side note, can I just brag for a second? I'm just realizing something. Can I have a point of personal privilege? Can I just brag for a second? I think I'm losing a lot of weight because I'm wearing a t-shirt right now that I probably haven't worn in a long, probably at least I got this t-shirt in 2021. And I haven't worn this t-shirt in a long ass time because I gained a bunch of weight in 2021 and into 2020 and through 2022. And then because I was just getting harassed all the time and I was stress eating all the time and I was doing all this stuff. And so I gained a whole bunch of weight. And then throughout 2023, I think I slowly started kind of losing it. And I think I'm really losing it now because I'm on this fucking accidental keto diet. And so I pulled this t-shirt out of a box today just because I needed something to wear because I didn't have any other t-shirts at the ready. And I put it on. I didn't really think much of it at the time. And now I'm like, this t-shirt is fucking loose on me. This isn't even an XL. I think this is like a shrunken large t-shirt. So this isn't even a proper large t-shirt. This is like a shrunken large t-shirt that I've washed many times several years. I'm accidentally losing weight. Holy shit. And I guess it's like one of those things where I don't weigh myself. I haven't weighed myself in years because I actually don't really care that much. But when you kind of when you put on a shirt that you haven't worn in a long ass time, and not only does it fit, but it's actually pretty loose. That's just kind of cool, man. That's kind of cool. Yay for me. Accidental keto diet for the win.
Human history, people have worked for justice. So that's just as natural. And that's the side I want to be on. So the quotes, Ta-Nehisi Coates quote that works for me is, racism is the parent, race is the child.
Okay, say more about
you have to kind of sit with that. So I always thought, well, you start with race, difference, people see difference, and then racism comes because they're afraid of difference. And he's saying, no, you start with racism and you get race. So you have a group of people who have resources that you want, and you have the means to exploit
I know how to
those
do weight
resources,
training. I used to do it all
and
the
then
time.
you make up a story to
Listen, Groypers. I know I used to be in the gym all the time. I used to run marathons, bro. I know how to work out and weight train if I want to. I'm actually really good at weight training. I'm actually really I have actually like true story. I don't know, we're sidetracking. We're taking a me moment, like whatever. I have I have a naturally athletic body. I have the muscle fibers that elite athletes have, like the fast twitch muscle fiber. So the point is, if I wanted to go back to the gym and really get my ass in shape, I could do it. I could do it really quickly. Maybe I will. I don't know. I've been kind of chilling for the last several years, not really worrying about it. But maybe I will. Maybe when the next AF pack comes, maybe you're all in for a fucking surprise. All right? Maybe I will. Be like, holy shit, what the fuck happened to Carlin? Maybe. We'll see.
justify your exploitation. And so race is the story we made up to justify what we were doing.
I'll never lose my ass, though.
Which I
It'll
think,
never happen.
given an author I interviewed last week who was looking at the history of slavery.
Yeah. Next AF pack, I'm going to have big tech revenge body. Maybe I will.
In particular, suggests that the turning point really is where Europeans, Portuguese initially and then others later, started going from enslaving other conquered individuals to formalizing chattel slavery, the actual ownership of initially Black people as an economic.
So this is the creation of whiteness. What they're talking about right here. Remember we said that capitalism, which is defined as private property ownership, created it created slavery in America because slavery is the ownership of people as private property. Listen to how he puts this.
Conquered individuals to formalizing chattel slavery, the actual ownership of initially Black people as an economic unit of power.
That's the creation
and that othering, that race follows that as a way to, it becomes racialized. And then we have 400 years of terrible history that we're trying to unpack.
Yes.
So that framing that you're borrowing from Coates matches what Howard French's work was doing back in 1471 as well.
And again, an important counter to the narrative that, well, we've always had slavery, they also practice slavery. No, we've never had the kind of industry, the kind of generation after generation after generation, the systemic nature of chattel slavery.
So to move to the more recent book, Nice Racism, How Progressive White People Perpetuate Racial Harm. So we have this historical narrative we spend a little time on. This seems to take the point a little further. Nice racism. Tell us what you're after here.
Yeah, well, I'm writing to folks like me, folks who would not see themselves on the white nationalist side or anywhere near it. And I make a claim in White Fragility that I get asked about a lot. It's a very provocative claim, and Nice Racism is meant to answer it. So I say in White Fragility that I think progressive white people actually cause the most daily harm.
Okay.
And why do I say that? I have had so many people of color, Black people in particular, say to me, give me the in-your-face racist, the white nationalist. I know where they're coming from. I know how to protect myself. But the kind of racism that gets perpetuated by folks like me is so much more insidious. It leads to gaslighting. It's hard to put your hands on. And people of color aren't typically hanging out with white nationalists. They're hanging out, working side by side with folks like me. And we are the ones that send them home exhausted day after day.
Why?
Oh, there's so many parts to that. One, we're racially ignorant, but we're arrogant in our ignorance. And it would appear that we would want to protect, it's a kind of a willful ignorance, a refusal to know or see in order to protect our identities as good, moral people. So we can be very defensive. There's a study that I cite in there by Paul Gorski and forgive me for
Paul
other
Gorski!
co-author's name, I forget.
I know who Paul Gorski is. Does anyone else know who Paul Gorski is? Paul Gorski was the guy. Do you guys remember the spy stream that we did so this is going to be for the OGs. We did a spy stream that was like a 3-part spy stream where basically they were talking about how they were teaching equity to children in like kindergarten and something like that. Paul Gorski owned and what was so great about this spy stream, it was like 1 spy stream a week, and they found out I was spy streaming them after the first week, and they actually called me out in the second week, and they were like, "We know this is being streamed on the internet right now." And I was like, "Hi, yeah, it is," but they still let me film it, and they still let me stream it on the internet. Anyway, Paul Gorski is this DEI trainer that owns, I think it's called like the Equity Institute or the Institute for Equity, something like that. They do training for like teachers to teach them how to integrate this woke shit into their curriculum.
They talked to people of color who were anti-racist activists, and they cited the major source of their burnout were white
Socialist.
anti-racist activists. Does that surprise anybody? Because we can be so sure it's not us. And so it's everybody else, it's not us. We're going to be very defensive about protecting that identity that we have and that we want you to have. We spend a lot of time doing what I call credentialing, which is all the ways that we try to establish that we're not racist, none of which is convincing if you understand racism. So classic one, I'm not racist. I had a Black roommate in college.
Okay.
I'd say, well, was he invited to your wedding? And the reason I think of weddings and I talk about weddings is that big or small, that's your circle. And I would ask the audience, how often have you been to a wedding that if it wasn't all white, it was pretty close?
Right.
And how often have you been to a funeral that if it wasn't all white, it was pretty close? Right. Because most white people go cradle to grave in racial segregation with no sense at all that anything or anyone of value has been lost.
You know what? After my experience in Detroit, getting accosted at a 7-Eleven by a Black person, I'm gonna say that I'm listen. I don't care if people are Black. I don't care if people are brown. I don't care if people are Asian. I don't care what people are. But I'm enjoying my segregated life here in New Hampshire, and I don't really anticipate moving anytime soon. And I enjoy the fact that New Hampshire is like 95% white. And I don't want New Hampshire to be Detroit. Detroit sucked. Detroit sucked on like several different levels. I'm sure there are nice parts of Detroit, and I'm sure there are nice people in Detroit, but I don't want New Hampshire to be Detroit. I'm fine here. I like it like it is.
In fact, we measure the value of our space by the absence of Black people in particular. That's a very deep message that I've internalized, that you've internalized.
Can you say a little more about that last point? Because I think that's a pretty strong statement to put out there, that we measure the success of a space by the absence of Black people.
Yeah. So when I say good school, when I say bad school, when I say good neighborhood, when I say bad, sketchy neighborhood, when I say that neighborhood's coming up, that's racial discourse. We know what we're talking about. The less Black people that go to that school or that live in that neighborhood, the higher the status of the neighborhood's going to be. And the more Black people that are there, the lower the status the neighborhood is going to be. It's just, it's so internalized. And when we talk to each other that way, we're reinforcing that, and that doesn't have to be conscious.
And we don't have to go all the way to historical redlining in the financial industry or mortgage or insurance or banking to understand that this is a practice that unintentional, unconscious, perhaps,
Yeah, sometimes I do wonder.
or maybe not.
Yeah. Another really important understanding that we need to have about systemic racism is that it's highly adaptive. It just adapts to challenges and changes. We can see that across history, but we can definitely see it during the Obama presidency. Those of us who do this kind of work, it was harder during those years because people would say, we're post-racial. We have arrived. We have a Black president. And I don't think anyone is in denial today that we are so not post-racial, that explicit white nationalism has just exploded. There's more permission. It's like what Carol Anderson argues, every inch of Black progress is met with a backlash of white rage. So it's an adaptive system. Now that's a strong example, but neighborhoods, we steer each other away, right? So we don't need those redlining covenants. We do it in a more naturalized.
And to your point about, progress and backlash, you can do that narrative from the 13th and 14th Amendments through the Civil Rights Act, Voting Rights Act in the 60s, through to your example of the Obama presidency and what has followed. So I actually do want to take up one of the questions that we got at registration, which relates to this very point, is has anything changed for the better between the two books, or between 2011 and where we are now?
Something changed for the better in terms of society?
Yeah.
So what you're seeing, you saw the summer of 2020 when, it breaks my heart that it took the videotaping of the murder of George Floyd, that it was so brutal and so egregious that it couldn't be denied, right? That you really, up until then, a lot of white people said, well, he must have done something. But that video was so explicit and vivid. And so you saw this huge revitalization of interest in anti-racism, right? It was everywhere. And those of us who do this work, we were getting hundreds of calls every day. You've got to come, you've got to come now, and you've got to talk about this. And now it's not in front of us on the news. And a lot of that apathy has come back in. Right?
So it didn't sustain that appetite for change.
I don't think it did. No, I don't think that it did. Now, I do see a few things. I see much more representation in ads, in movies. Sometimes with movies, it's like, okay, they put one Black person in that role, and that's better than nothing, but it's fairly token, but you see it. I see more people of color being asked to speak and do the work. That's a change. So, it's a push and pull.
The other part of the title here is how progressive white people. So that's the progressive part I'd like to spend a little time on, because if you're not bringing about real change, then how progressive are you really?
Good point.
And so what is...
Oh, man, bro. Seriously. Okay, now you're forcing me to put you on the spot. How much beer do I drink? You wanna be a dick in my chat? Now you're getting put on the spot. How much beer do I drink? I don't even know why you're bringing up my beer consumption anyway. You should be watching the video that you're doing right in front of us. But since you brought it up, how much beer do you actually think I drank? How much beer do you have evidence of that I drink? We deal in reality here. We don't deal in made up bullshit. How much beer do you think I drink? You're welcome to answer. We're going to sit here and I'm going to demean you until you do. How much beer do you think I drank? I'm going to beat this inclination out of people to say bullshit like this in my chat. If you say bullshit like this in my chat and then you can't back it up, you either admit that you're wrong or you're going to get banned. And that's going to be that. No. We're waiting for our mouthing off friend. We're waiting. Mike Homage, how much beer do you think I drink? I know you're here, bro. I know you're watching. Let me make this very clear, Mike Homage. If you do not chat in and answer the question that I'm clearly asking you after you wanted to shit talk me in the chat, I'm going to permanently ban you. How much beer do you think I drink? You have 10 seconds to answer the question. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Last chance. I'll give you just a minute more just because there's a delay, but you're about to get permanently banned if you don't answer the fucking question. All right. Gave you time. Goodbye.
Is it about this armchair progressiveness that is contributing to the problem rather than even moving the needle a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, white progressives are my people. I live in Seattle. Okay, we're
I live
3
in
hours.
Boston,
We're
you know,
3 hours
yeah,
from
right?
Portland, Oregon, right? So, and it's just so much of what I learned about how racism manifests on a daily way came from the community that I live in, from the people I'm around. It's. I don't know that I mean it literally like.
By the way, the correct answer to that question is I drink maybe 3 beers in a week. Maybe. Usually it's more like 2 beers, but maybe I might have a third, and that's in like a week. So that's actually the correct answer.
Like true, if they were truly progressive, it would be different. But I didn't want to use the word liberal. It's just white people who see themselves on this side of the struggle. But anyone who exempts themselves is not progressive and doesn't understand systemic racism. None of us are exempt. It's not going to end in our lifetimes. Unfortunately,
not going to end in our lifetimes.
There's another part of this that I want to draw attention to, and by the way, get the book, read the book. It's an incredible analysis of some of the challenges to where people think progress is, but in fact maybe is not. And this is the spiritual versus religious dimension, because I think religion is very much a part of our lives. Spirituality is very much part of your lives, whatever particular thing you believe, and it's not necessarily always additive to progress. Christianity is a religion based on love.
We'll just let that sit.
And please fill in the rest of the sentence, because it's much more complex than that.
The title of the chapter is spiritual, not religious, because that's the classic kind of white liberal that I'm trying to call in or talk to, where they're going to eschew organized religion, but they see themselves as spiritual. And the ways that it can manifest around protecting racism is they can tell people of color that they just need to think positive. Why are you bringing this energy onto yourself? It can be really gaslighting to use spirituality as the answer. That if you just got closer to whatever that means to you, you would do better. And I don't know if I have the cartoon in there, but there's a New Yorker cartoon that I love that just nails this. So it's got 2 ducks floating, and one of them looks really miserable. And the other one says, maybe you should ask yourself why you're inviting all this duck hunting into your life right now. And it just like that's what I wanted to get at. And going down to South America and taking ayahuasca, with no understanding of the impact you have there, with no relationship to indigenous peoples here.
Fuck you,
there are
Robin.
certain aspects. putting Buddhism on a pedestal.
Robin says it's racist to do ayahuasca. Whatever. I'm a massive racist then. I went to South America to do ayahuasca. I admit it. I spent time in Peru doing ayahuasca. And so I admit my inherent racism. I also did ayahuasca several times in Sedona. So I must have, I mean, Sedona's not South America. Sedona's pretty like white and liberal. So maybe I was only racist when I went to Peru to do ayahuasca, but I was not racist when I went to Sedona to do ayahuasca. And now I can do ayahuasca anywhere. Now there are ayahuasca churches in New Hampshire. God, I want to do ayahuasca again. I really want to do an ayahuasca ceremony again. It's been years. When was the last time I did ayahuasca? It was before 2020. I mean, I didn't have like the outcome of it was really good. I recommend, honest to God, I recommend everyone try ayahuasca at some point. And I know so this is not about, so for people who might be like, no, I don't do, this is not about, it's not about like hallucinating. It's a spiritual experience. It's about healing. It is actually a spiritual ceremony. It's about like all ayahuasca is a plant and a vine. Like it's not something that's like cooked up in like a laboratory or anything. And it's about spiritual healing and letting things go and all that stuff. And so I had a great experience every time I did it, sometimes more than others. But yeah, there are churches everywhere now. There weren't when back in the day yeah, but it's not that's not the purpose of it. Like I've actually very rarely actually hallucinated on ayahuasca. It's not like ayahuasca is not like mushrooms in that like you're not going to have the same type of experience. Ayahuasca is about healing the body. It's about healing the spirit. It really is. It's not just about like ooh and like all this stuff. That's just not what it is. So, and the people that use it that way, honestly, like they tend to get their asses kicked by it. They purge a lot. Like it's not a good experience. And like, I mean, I don't know. But I think everyone should do ayahuasca, and I don't actually think it's racist to do it.
Right, Buddhism is actually a really patriarchal religion, but it's very sacred to a lot of white liberals.
Well, I mean, I think history is littered with examples of religion being used to justify various forms of oppression and structure. So that I'm glad to see that unpacked or referenced in the
Nice
work as well.
You can just Google. Just Google ayahuasca church. You'll be able to find them. I mean, I've done Cambo Frog too. Cambo Frog is worse than ayahuasca. Cambo Frog is when they take a little stick and they light it on fire and then they stick it into your arm and they make holes in your arm. And I still have scars from doing Cambo, which is another thing I'd actually like to do again because I felt amazing afterwards. And then after they burn holes in your arm, which really effing hurts, they take poison that they scrape off of a back of a tree frog and they put it over the holes that they just burned in your arm, and it resets your entire immune system and you feel great. But it hurts, and it is an intense experience. Cambo Frog is the most intense thing that I've ever done. It was really, I thought I was going to pass out, but I didn't. But it was something.
You
Anyway,
did mention that you often
sorry.
get asked about a particular quote in the first book, and I'd like to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about that. It's like, trying to be less white.
Yes.
Could you tell us what you mean by that?
Yeah. So, and let me just say, I try to be less white. Now, I don't mean being white. White people are bad, and it's bad to be white. That's certainly how people have used that to undermine the work.
Hi.
What I mean by that is I try to be less
Hi,
white
Robin.
in the ways in which
I did that.
being white is oppressive, in the ways that I have been socialized as a white person to be oblivious, to be racially ignorant but also arrogant, to be apathetic, to be silent, to privilege another white person's feelings over racism, right? To feel superior. And I'm just going to say this. Nobody grows up in this country not knowing it's better to be white. Not that white people are better, but it's better to be white. And research shows that as early as 3 to 4 children, all children get that message. They understand. Watch Frozen with a racial lens. Right? Look at the images. Watch the little girls of color with the backpacks, with the frozen images. Right? I could go on. Look at the Sistine Chapel. God creating man. Right? Now, the impact of that message is very different depending on whether you are or are not white. But I don't think anyone could miss the message. The way you respond to it will vary. You can resist it or not resist it, but you can't be exempt from it. And that's what I'm trying to get white people to grapple with. That's a piece of it too. Internalized superiority is a piece of this work.
And you mentioned sex and gender earlier in the brief conversation there about the rise of white nationalism. So other areas of difference or othering become parallel, I think, to this work. So not only is there a narrative about racism that works here, there's a narrative about gender differences and other identities too.
Yes. So white women, I'm a cisgender woman. My pronouns are she, her. We have a really powerful way into this through sexism and patriarchy and our experiences of it. But all too often, unfortunately, white women use that as a way out, as a kind of, we're all women and we're all oppressed, and I couldn't have privilege because I experienced sexism. And you can certainly experience sexism and also perpetrate somebody else's oppression. And so we can't use it in that way. And for me, also, I mentioned earlier that I grew up poor. And from a very early age, I had a very deep sense of
She grew up
shame.
poor.
I can share many experiences.
Robin DiAngelo grew up in like a gated community in San Jose. Robin DiAngelo did not grow up poor. Whatever, Robin. Okay.
In which I felt humiliated around being dirty, having my hand held up in a classroom as an example of poor hygiene to the whole class, people whispering, shh, they're poor. So, very acute awareness of it. And I also always knew I was white in that, and I knew that it was better to be white, right? So I got that lesson too. And I tell this story in the book.
Robin knew from a very young age that it was better for her to be white.
Where, I would see food left out somewhere, and we were pretty chronically hungry. We had periods of homelessness in my childhood, and I would reach for this food and I'd be admonished, don't touch that.
Like, what Robin means when she says she was poor is that she was relatively poor next to the multi-millionaires that her family lived around. She was like from like an average kind of like upper middle class family that had enough money to live around multi-millionaires, but they weren't multi-millionaires themselves. And so she was considered to be poor.
You don't know who touched it. Could have been a colored person, which was the language at that time, which meant a Black person. And it was really clear to me that
they literally call them people
if
of
a
color
colored
now.
person touched it, it would be dirty. And yet we were literally dirty. But in those moments when we projected our shame onto Black people, which is what we were doing, right? I wasn't poor anymore. I was white. Those moments realigned me with the dominant white.
Did you just hear that? Robin's like, I grew up in a poor neighborhood, and I was so poor that they used me as an example in school to show other people how poor I was. And I had dirty fingers. And the kids whispered about me being poor. But when I was next to a black person, I wasn't poor anymore. I was white. I fucking miss this shit, man. I miss this around Robin DiAngelo. Robin says some of the craziest. Robin admits that she's a racist like all the time. Let's listen to that again. But guys, I do want to remind you, we do have about 20 minutes left of this stream. We are still a little bit a ways from the super chat goal. So if you appreciate the stream I've done for you today, from the breaking news about Lucas Gage to the information about Nick Fuentes evolving and having a better tie selection, to the recap of the Lauren Chen, Michaela Peterson, Nick Fuentes, me ratio from last night, to me actually showing my cleavage in a picture, to me breaking down this session and watching it with you guys so we can remind ourselves of the beauty of Robin DiAngelo. If you appreciate any of this, what will inevitably be at least a 2.5 hour or 3 hour stream, please go ahead and send in a super chat to show your appreciation. If 20 of you send in a $5 super chat, I reach my goal of just getting like $100 in super chats on the show. I would really appreciate it. I spend my time doing this stuff for you guys. If you can afford to send in a $5 super chat, if you can, it's cool, man. Not everyone can afford to do that. Some of you are supporting my work in multiple ways. I understand. I'm not trying to guilt trip anyone. But as a reminder, if you are so inclined, now is the time to do it. And we will continue. Let's listen to Robin say again that when comparing herself to black people, she was no longer poor. She was white.
Could have been a colored person, which was the language at that time, which meant a black person. And it was really clear to me that if a colored person touched it, it would be dirty. And yet we were literally dirty. But in those moments, when we projected our shame onto black people, which is what we were doing, right? I wasn't poor anymore. I was white. Those moments realigned me with the dominant white culture that my poverty separated me from. And so I think white people need black people. There is no superior without inferior. And by the way, any white person who tries to say, I don't have racial privilege because I grew up poor, send them to me. I don't know how you can look anyone in the eye and say to be poor and black and poor and white is the same thing. I wasn't also struggling with racism.
Can that be a source of empathy then? I mean,
ideally, yes. Empathy, not that it's the same, but that I have a way to connect. And actually, the moment when I realized,
thank you.
So I'm late to academia, and
you.
I have imposter syndrome. You know, always sat there feeling a day late and $1 short, and I was just sure they were all smarter than I was. And of course, I used to think that that's how it worked, that smart people went to college. Then I got there, and it's like, oh, okay, that's not what that's not how this works. This is not the cream of the crop that wrote. No. And then I began to teach college, and I'm like, this is definitely not how this works. But I would be in a meeting, right? A faculty meeting, and these people probably went to boarding school and they went to Ivy League, and they've been groomed. Their brains have been groomed their whole life. And I often wonder, if only my brain had been groomed my whole life. Well,
access and privilege going on.
Yes.
There, right?
So I'd be in these meetings. This is what I do. I did anti-racist work before I ever went to college. So I would see dynamics happening in these discussions. Maybe it was a hiring situation. And I would want to say something like, hey, I'm seeing racism in the way we're talking about these candidates. But I would feel inferior. I feel like, what if they cite some research I haven't read, right? I don't think I'm smart enough to challenge it. And so it wasn't superiority that was keeping me quiet. It was truly inferiority. But then when I stepped out of myself and I said, so how's that functioning? How is your silence functioning in this room?
Thank you, Liz.
Regardless of what's driving it?
Thank
You are upholding racism. And you know what? You're going to get ahead. for doing that. And you're going to be seen as a team player. And that's just not okay. And you know what? It's a lie that I'm not as smart as these people just because of my background. And so,
Well, how much money has she made off this script? I mean, she made millions off of that book. Robin DiAngelo was on the New York Times bestseller list for like 2 straight years. She made millions and millions of dollars off that book. But then Robin was doing speaking engagements where she was charging a minimum of like $25,000 a speaking engagement for like an hour or two. So she raked it in. Now, I mean, she's not as relevant as much anymore, but like when she was relevant, making money hand over fist, not even. And also remember, she was also doing diversity training during 2020, which was, if I had been smart, honestly, I would have just done diversity training in 2020. I would have just made that shit up. I would have just repackaged something and called it diversity training. But she really leaned into it. She was the most sought after diversity trainer by all. Like she made money hand over fist. Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate you. Thank you, Sin. Sin says, this poor woman has pissed me off. No, she was never poor. Current estimated net. See, I actually would have thought it would be more than $5 million if I'm honest about it.
when I speak up, I'm simultaneously using my position, but I'm also challenging my internalized inferiority and the lie of that. So for me, to center race is actually the most powerful way to address everything. A lot of white people who experience oppression want to center their oppression. And I would say, okay, you can do that, but you have to address how has being white shaped how you experience that oppression, because it's different.
And then to complete the narrative, one would hope that because you have that power or privilege, that we have a greater response. Those of us who are white have a greater, and are in positions of power, have a greater responsibility to make change.
It's not without risk, but the risks are not the same. Yeah, definitely.
I think we'd like to take some questions.
Yeah, audience Q&A, best part.
And we have a number of questions that were submitted at registration. So I'm sure we have a couple of people either online or in the audience who submitted these. So I will pose them to you, Robin, and we'll see where we go. And there's a couple of looking forward to this discussion. Thank you. Loved the first book. Gave several away to friends who were also changed by it. So thank you. This question is, how do I get white leadership, presumably at their organization, how do I get white leadership to attend my race and the workplace monthly forums? So this person didn't identify themselves, so I don't know what their own personal story or narrative or identity is. I can guess. But basically, how do we engage with other white people to participate in this?
Yeah, I mean, these are challenging questions, and I think it does speak to the apathy. If you are not, if the leadership is not attending that, then whatever you have on your mission statement, whatever your anti-racism statement is, you better take it off. Because you can't have a statement like that and not actually be doing the work and showing up. So a couple different strategies they could use. The leadership needs to see that it's valuable to them, that there's something in it for them. And whatever way you can approach that. I mean, I often say in 2022, if you cannot engage in these issues with some nuance and some complexity, one, you're really not qualified to lead. And it's going to come in a moment where that's going to show, and you don't want that. Right. So, I mean, if you have to go that way, take that approach. Another one is to find maybe that one person in the leadership team that is open and ask them to kind of.
And I think it's also, you don't have to have the language perfect. You don't have to have the plan perfect, but you've got to be moving forward. And as we all make mistakes, I know I've made mistakes. You pick yourself up, you apologize if you need to apologize, and you keep going. This next question says, my school has a new group called the Racial Equity Team.
Oh, God.
As a white person, How can I serve on this team in an anti-racist way?
I'm going to assume that it's a mixed team. And so the first thing that comes to me is to ask the folks of color how they can serve. What do they need? What do they want? The more you do your own work, the more you're aware of your own whiteness and how it informs what you see, what you don't see, how you respond, the more sensitive you'll be to the dynamics at play. You always want to be paying attention and asking yourself, what is the most strategic way for me to engage in this moment? And it's really hard to get that right by everybody, but that is the question you should be asking. So is this a time where I should hold back and just listen? Is this a time where I should come forward and show myself? That's what you want to be grappling with. Any default engagement, in other words, I'm an introvert, I never speak in groups, so I don't speak in this group either. That's not a strategic engagement. That's default. You are defaulting to your most comfortable way. And I can tell you that if it's around race, your most comfortable way will be problematic.
Right. And I think it's also about knowing some groups are defined as affinity groups for people of color only.
Yes.
Others are defined for people of color and allies. And then there are some other conversations.
So affinity groups are essentially racial segregation within organizations to make them feel like they're good liberals.
Perhaps like we're doing tonight, where there's a piece of this work that has to be done by white people.
Yes.
And asking and knowing and identifying is a crucial step. One, I forget where the section is in here, where it talks about, assuming, exactly that your opinion as a white person is welcome in every single circumstance, and it may or may not be, right? So ask.
Yeah.
This next question: what can I do as a Black woman in expressing my pain? It feels like I'm making people feel uncomfortable.
And that's one of those questions that I find heartbreaking, because it's really on us as white people to get ourselves into a condition in which she doesn't have to worry about how she's making us feel in order to express her pain. I mean, unfortunately, the society we live in is set up in a way that she does have to do that in order to be safe. And so I would ask those of us who are white to get to work to transform ourselves so that we can bear witness to her pain, that we can hear, we can affirm and validate, we can ask her what she needs, and she doesn't have to attend to our feelings, right? And that our feelings are actually grace and openness and compassion rather than defensiveness or apathy.
I saw this actually. Jordan Peterson threatened to beat up a groyper. Did you guys see this? I'm sorry. I probably should have covered this earlier. Let me show you guys this little bit of crazy. I know we're doing some derailing, but sometimes it's okay to derail when you're watching a boring training, because we're still getting the good parts of the training and we're still listening to what the left believes and all that stuff. But sometimes it's okay to derail and to look at Jordan Peterson threatening a groyper to beat him up. I swear to God. Hang on. This is Jordan Peterson's. Yeah, I saw a screenshot of it earlier. I forgot. This is Jordan Peterson. So now, admittedly, the groyper that Jordan Peterson threatened to beat up was, well, a little antagonistic. But oh no, he got suspended. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no, did anyone get a screenshot? Oh no. Okay, what happened was the groyper called Jordan Peterson's granddaughter a retard. Hang on, let me see if I know exactly what he posted. Hang on. I know exactly what he posted. Hang on. I know what he posted. I just need to go find the original account it came from. Okay, I know. I saw it before he got banned. Okay, hang on. So this is follow AF Hasbara on Twitter because he's hilarious. He does like this breaking news stuff that's just like it's hilarious. Anyway, here it is. Here it is. Actually, he's got the screenshot. So AF Hasbara said made this breaking news thing that said that Jordan Peterson's grandchild was born retarded. And then this is what Jordan Peterson retweeted and threatened to beat up the groiper. And he said, "It would be a privilege to beat you to a pulp." And then it got put in the Joe Rogan Reddit. But this is a funny account. He does a good job. Oh, Jordan Peterson blocked him. Oh no. There it is again. It's all so. I mean, listen. I'm not condoning. I'm not condoning calling a baby a retard. Okay, that's wrong. No one should call a baby a No one should call a baby a retard. Yeah, well, Bot does make a good point. But that doesn't mean it's hinged into reality for Jordan Peterson to threaten to beat him up. Jordan Peterson is a clinical psychologist. He is the greatest psychologist of all time. He really shouldn't be threatening to beat people up for making a joke on the internet. Really shouldn't be threatening that. All right, let's get back to Robin.
A lot more in this context, I would assume, that we don't know from the question. But asking is always a good place to start.
I mean, as a white person, to ask.
This is a great question. So does Robin really believe this stuff? Yes. Robin 100% believes this. This is part of who Robin is. And guys, this is true of most leftists. Most leftists 100% believe everything they're saying. They're not mentally ill. They just, have different values than you do. And this is something that Robin, at the core of her soul, absolutely believes. No, I won't. No, I mean, I don't feel a particular need to say that on X. I've already said it on video, so no, I don't think that I will do that. No.
What do you need?
Yes.
Or what can I do?
What can I do can be a hard one. I just want to say that doesn't mean don't ask it. Right. It's just that sometimes the person who's in pain doesn't know what they want or what they need. So you want to ask that in a kind of an open way, as opposed to, I need you to give me the answer. Right. In your pain right now, give me the answer.
Right. Another version of the same question, I think, but it stands alone. What can people of African descent do to better educate white allies, specifically about living while Black?
Well, there are many, many ways and forms in which Black people, people of African descent, have shared their experiences. They write, they speak, they do poetry, they do performances, they share in relationships. I often think that if we have a truly integrated life, if we have authentic cross-racial relationships, if we have built trust, they don't have to tell us. Just being in relationship, we will see if we're paying attention, right? It doesn't have to be this, like, I'm going to sit you down and give you this lesson. But I also think it's an empowering choice for people of African descent, in this case, to choose not to share their tender hurts or experiences with us, and that doesn't mean they've somehow given up or sold out, but they're just like, you know, the expression throwing your pearls. You know, it's okay to say, I don't want to throw my pearls. They got crushed the last time I did it. I don't want them to get crushed, and I'm not giving you that. That's a gift.
Right, and it depends on the space and who's there and what support is needed. Agreed. I want to go back to the poverty analysis that you gave us from
your opinion seems to be compelling me to say something on Twitter, to denounce something because it offends you. My opinion is it's a joke, and I don't particularly feel the need to denounce something on Twitter just because it offends you. I already said it on the video. Do you want me? Are there any other platforms that you would like me to denounce this particular thing on? How many platforms is acceptable? Because I said pretty clearly on the video, I don't actually think that we should be calling babies retards. That should actually be enough. Do you want me to do more in addition to that? How many platforms is acceptable to make you feel better about the fact that someone told a joke that you didn't like? You want to keep pushing this, I'm more than happy to respond. I am not denouncing anything on Twitter just because you don't like it.
Your own personal life as well as in the work here, because there is also a narrative that one of the ways out of the racial injustice is, well, we just need more economic equality and all of the programs to bring that about, which I fully support. I think ultimately one of the tests of being successful will be, you know, where earnings are more equitable, where wealth is more equitable. But I'm not sure that alone, like solving poverty alone, is not a solution for racism per se.
Yeah. What I worry about when class comes up, basically capitalism, right? I mean, capitalism depends on poverty. I mean, you can't.
Robin just said capitalism more than James Lindsay has this week. Again, I need to pay better attention. Again, hang on.
Is, well, we just need more economic equality and all of the programs to bring that about, which I fully support. I think ultimately one of the tests of being successful will be, you know, where earnings are more equitable, where wealth is more equitable. But I'm not sure that alone, like solving poverty alone, is not a solution for racism per se.
Yeah. What I worry about when class comes up, basically capitalism, right? I mean, capitalism depends on poverty. I mean, you can't have a capitalist system without having an incredible hierarchy. And race is a really key piece, and they are deeply connected, but they're also separate, if that makes sense. And so what happens sometimes—
wrong. See, this is why Robin got excommunicated from the left, because the left does not see race as separate from capitalism. The left sees race as created by capitalism. They only use Robin for like but like what I said earlier, Robin doesn't actually understand this. Robin just grifted off this to make millions of dollars, but she doesn't actually understand it. So, do people see that?
This is what I want to speak to here. It didn't just happen, but I want to speak to what I call channel changing, right? Where we're trying to talk about racism, and then it moves over to the real oppression is classism.
See?
And then that takes race off the table.
See, this is why Robin got canceled, because Robin only wanted to talk about skin color. And she just wanted all white people to believe they were racist. And Robin thought she could solve racism by talking about skin color. The left does not believe that you can solve racism without abolishing capitalism. Does everyone understand why Robin is like no longer relevant on the left? Because this is the crux of it right here. She wrote a book specifically directed at the left, saying you guys are the ones who are racist. She wasn't shilling this abolish capitalism stuff, although she understands it on some level. She understands that race and capitalism are inextricably connected, but she's flat out saying we need to separate these problems. The left as a whole doesn't believe that they need to separate those problems. They believe that all racism is created by capitalism, and if they just abolish capitalism, they will fix all racism. Does everyone understand this, or do I need to break it down a little bit more? Because I'm more than happy to break it down a little bit more. I just want I want someone to tell me that I need to in order to do that. It's so interesting that she put it like this, though, because it's so clear what the disconnect was. I think that Robin is a progressive. I don't think Robin is a socialist. But she has some of those sensibilities, but she's not a revolutionary leftist.
If we can talk about how classism intersects with racism, but we've got to keep race on the table.
Right.
And there's such a strong pull for those of us who are white to get racism off the table. So it isn't that we shouldn't be or don't need to be talking about economic inequality, but if we're not centering race in that conversation, we're probably conveniently taking it off the table. It's less comfortable. I would say it's the least comfortable. Classism's so vague and capitalism's so big.
Abstract.
They're like, yeah, let's just do that.
Which is another form of being nice about it
Yeah.
and not actually addressing the challenge. There's a third book.
He just said that leftists who focus on capitalism they're just avoiding the race question. They're just avoiding the real conversation. Wow. This is why she got excommunicated right here.
That I have here. You have more than 3, but I wanted to spend a moment before we close this part of our evening together, talking about why did you write this book and who is it for in contradistinction to the other two. This is called The Facilitator's Guide for White Affinity Groups. Strategies for Leading White People in an Anti-Racist Practice. I'm not going to assume it's self-explanatory.
Okay, thank you.
Please tell us about this book.
Like to talk about it. The ultimate goal, of course, is to bridge racial divides. But as a white person, white people generally are not in good shape to do that. And so what often happens is workplaces do this all the time. Community groups throw everyone in the room and say, talk about race. And then white people are stepping all over the feet, metaphorically, of people of color. It's often literally the words people of color have used with me is those are traumatic experiences. You're putting me in a room with white people who don't even know what it means to be white, who've never thought deeply about their own position. And then, you're asking us to have a conversation that has any kind of meaning or is constructive in any way. So some of this we really need to do separately. It's sensitive work. Talking about internalized superiority, that's something we probably don't need to be doing in front of people of color, right? Struggling with defensiveness and hurt, and I just don't get this, right? I think people of color want us to be struggling with that. They just don't want to have to bear witness to it. And it also frees us up. It's like I'm not having to worry about the impact of.
Hang on. Auto Hoax has a question. How far do they take the concept of no private property? Here is what they mean when they say abolish. Okay, so we need to take this step by step. The left defines capitalism explicitly as private property ownership. It is not about crony capitalism. It's not about corrupt capital. It's not about any of those things. It is explicitly and exclusively private property ownership. The things that are included as private property ownership are your ability to own a home, your ability to own land, your ability to own an apartment rental that you rent out as a landlord, your ability to own a private business, any size of private business, even small private business, because small private business is considered to be the petit bourgeois. It means your intellectual property. They don't believe intellectual property is a thing. It means your parental rights. They consider your parental rights over your children to be a form of private property. And it means your individual liberties. So your freedom of speech, your freedom of religion, that sort of thing. That's also a form of property. And everything I just said doesn't come from me. I'm not making this up. We have seen leftists say explicitly all of this on video. You can check the clips on my Substack. You can check the clips on my YouTube channel. I can point you to clips for all of this stuff, but that is what they mean.
What I say, so I can be more open and more relaxed. And people of color have really sensitive conversations to have that they don't want to be having in front of white people. Anti-Blackness cuts across all groups. And that's a very sensitive conversation for all people of color to be having. What does anti-Blackness look like in our group, right? How is the darker one's skin, the more compounded the oppression? What does that look like among us, right? What about the messages of inferiority? How have I coped with those messages? Those are conversations that, one, aren't my business.
Appreciate you.
And really shouldn't be done in front of me. So we really do have to have a process. It's just one tool of many where we separate and do our own work. And it's a very common practice in anti-racist circles, sometimes called caucusing, affinity groups, white awareness groups. But there's very little on how to do them. You're going to come up against all the white patterns you can even imagine in a group like that. And so I've been facilitating them for many, many years. Another person who also facilitates, we just wrote this handbook. It's kind of got the theory, the practice, how do you set it up? What are the basic skills you need? When should you not do it? And then what are the patterns you're going to encounter? What do they look like? How do they function? And what are some strategies you can interrupt them? And it's got links to curriculum. So I'm excited about it because there's nothing like that out there. And then organizations can build capacity within house. Right? They can train their own facilitators. And actually, I'm going to be doing a train the trainer on this book. So just go to my website.
Well, I think given that you've introduced this concept of whiteness as a contribution to helping understand how we deal with our own racism and systemic racism, having also now a guidebook for how to do some of this work in practice is an amazing addition to the field. So we are right at the 1 hour mark. Wow. So we were able to take some questions that we got in advance, and I'd just like our audience here in person, and maybe if our online audience wants to join us as well, just join me in thanking.
No, I don't think we need to thank Robin. I don't think we need to thank her. But I do need to thank you for spending almost 3 hours with me today, guys. I really do appreciate it. Per usual, I will be back with hopefully better non-crazy hair tomorrow because it's cooling down in my office now. So maybe I won't be as sweaty. I'm so annoyed when my hair gets crazy, but it doesn't even turn into like good-looking sex hair. It just looks crazy. Anyway, I know you all forgive me, but guys, I do stream Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. We do Socialism Saturdays on Saturdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Please make sure you double check to make sure you are subscribed on YouTube, because YouTube does like to unsubscribe people. In fact, it unsubscribed Sin earlier in the middle of the stream. So please make sure you're subscribed there. And also, please make sure you head over to my Substack, which is bing, carlin.substack.com. Sign up for free email updates when I post new information, which I will be doing later on tonight because I got stuff to do. Anyway, mouth the like button on the way out the door if you haven't already. I will see you guys tomorrow at 5 p.m. Take care. Have a great rest of your day, guys. We'll see you soon. Bye.